Welcome everyone who is watching us on Grassroots TV today, or CG TV rather. It's about 10 after 11. It's Tuesday, December 13th, and you've tuned into our special meeting with the, actually regular quarterly meeting with the Open Space and Trail Board. So Dale, if you'd like to take it away at the end of the year wrap-up.
Sure. Well, these quarterly meetings are quite important to us, and I was telling John Peacock the story of how they started, how they came about. It came about in the context of a crisis back in 1998. The two boards got into a disagreement over something and decided they ought to meet regularly. So I think that these meetings serve us really well to keep an eye on the prize and make sure everyone's goals are in alignment. To that end, I put together this Open Space 2011 Year in Review piece. I normally like to do a PowerPoint, but the staff have a couple items in here that we need some direction on, and they were worried that if I started showing slides that we'd never get to the business. So, but in any event, certainly the mountain park has been the big project of the year, with our purchase that happened at the tail end of 2010, and this year has just been one sort of exciting development after the next with that, getting the trail built from Snowmass up onto the ridge in record time, and I was out there watching the staff from 3 different government jurisdictions working side by side building that trail. It was really pretty impressive. Shortly after that, we of course had our grand opening up on the ridge, or at Snowmass Town Center, with our walk up onto the ridge. Shortly after that, the Open Space Fund managed to repay the county general fund reserve for everything that we had borrowed, and I want to thank Tom Oken for all of his help in figuring out ways to finance that acquisition more efficiently than anyone believed it could have been done. And now we are in the full swing of a management planning process that Gary's leading up, having just completed a wildlife and cultural inventory for 2,500 acres of public land that are collectively owned by Pitkin County and Snowmass Village in the city of Aspen. That biological and cultural inventory is on our website, and anyone that really wants to know all the different things that are living up there, I would commend that to you. So I guess we want to thank the community for backing us up while we first purchased the centerpiece and are now in the midst of planning this mountain park. There's been a lot of other things that have happened this year that we're excited about. The extension of the Rio Grande Trail and Woody Creek, including both hard surface and soft surfaces, was nice, and we look forward to finishing that early next year with that final piece of the paved trail and grant funding that we obtained from the state, including some that was released to us by the city of Aspen. We also adopted this management plan for other power-driven mobility devices, which was something we didn't anticipate doing, and it took a fair amount of effort, but Lindsay did a great job in pulling that together. So it's now clear how people that need mobility assistance can utilize our trail system. We were the agency partner of the year for the Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, and Gary's been great at pulling together projects that get the public onto our lands and allow them to participate in both restoration projects and construction of new trails. The board did a retreat this year, the Open Space Board, and focused on 2 big topics, one being a recreation inventory for every bit of recreational property that the county owns, and a good amount of that has actually come to us through the Community Development Department had never before been put into a single binder so that it could all be seen, but now that we know everything that the county owns, and we have a pretty good idea of where some of the gaps are in the trail system that have been identified in other master plans, as I indicated earlier today, we will be hitting the ground running in January with a proposed work schedule to program all of those lands and properties and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, as well as coming out with a proposed sort of capital improvement plan for where the next trails are going to be built. So the second subject at our retreat was the growing interest in local food in the valley, and I think people often mistakenly believe that you really can't grow much up here except for beef, and we love our local beef, but we did some historic research on it and learned that up until the 1950s, this county was exporting massive quantities of potatoes as well as dairy. Between 1910 and 1955, it was an average of about 11 million pounds of potatoes were leaving this county. So that helps us remember just how significant the agricultural lands are in the watershed. And as a follow-up to our board retreat on that topic, the Open Space Board is looking at all of our acquisition priorities and policies, and we're contemplating a few refinements to those to make sure that we are staying in tune with the public's interest in local food production. In fact, I think tonight Edible Aspen is hosting a little local foodie summit and tasting celebration. But I look forward to continuing to work on that. Some of our other projects, I may not read through all of these one at a time in the interest of time, but we received 2 significant grants, one for the restoration of the Emma Powder House and the other one for the reprogramming of the Elk Park. We appreciate those, bringing some funds into the county. We had some interesting times worrying about coyotes and some other things. We welcomed Ty to the board and bid farewell to Franz Froliker. Welcome John Peacock, and I was quite thrilled with the new strategic plan, which has got open space woven into the very core of it. So I look forward to working with that in the coming years as well.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions on the year in review or any additional comments that the Open Space Board would like to make? No? Okay, George and Jack?
Yeah, just one comment on the sustainable food production. I know that you have had some conversations on the new purchase in Basalt and designated some part of that parcel for community garden, which is great. I know there was also some talk about potentially putting some a greenhouse there and maybe other places. And I would caution you to on going into a direction that becomes from a community sort of garden standpoint to a very commercial operation using open space lands. And I know we've just have looked at some new code amendments in regards to greenhouses, exempt square footages, and also looking at commercial aspects of greenhouses on land in Pickens County. So I'm a little concerned about that. In terms of the potato production, I think with the Basalt new distillery coming online, and they're looking at using just potatoes for the traditional
Vodka?
I think that's great to bring that back in.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, a technical question about the same issue of food production on open space. John, are there any, I don't mean property that's purchased with, like the Basalt piece, where we knew there was potential for a community garden and that was part of the package. But how about all the previous properties we bought? Are there any legal restrictions as to change of use from conservation and recreation to food production?
No, you'd have to look at each property individually to ascertain its condition and use at the time of its acquisition, at the time we expended public funds for it. You'd have to do it site by site.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions? I would just make a comment following on George's. I was down at the Colorado Ag Water Alliance meeting a week ago to sit on a couple panels, and it had come forward by some people to say, well, water providers and ag land working together, the business model might be a good idea. But separate from that, they raised the concern of, well, once you start publicly producing food like Boulder has, you get into these big GMO discussions about what type of seed can be used or not used, and whether the farmers can succeed without the GMOs and everything like that. So, it could be something that ends up taking a lot of time to see that go forward. But I can certainly support in appropriate locations moving forward the concept of local food production. Land is wonderful for wildlife habitat and certainly for recreation and to satisfy some of our other needs, so we're not just an importing valley. Makes sense to me. Howie?
Question back to George's comment about the greenhouses. Have the commission taken a position, or are they working on a position with respect to commercial greenhouses on private property?
We'd almost
Construction
need...
and running greenhouse businesses on private agricultural property.
I think we've done this code amendment to look at that and have some regulations, and of course, all of the different master plans, certainly the NEMA master plan, talks specifically about certain restrictions in terms of business commercial uses within that master plan. I'm sure some other master plans also speak to that as well.
Yeah, I think that is still kind of working with Cindy. We finished the ag structure building code, but not the greenhouse code.
What I was leading to on that, if you can grow vegetables or edible produce inside a greenhouse on a private property, have you considered that part of the local food production pipeline?
That certainly has been raised as part of the reasons to look at modifying that code. Would that be an appropriate way to describe that? There has been a little concern about if it's exempt to FAR, does it really become someone's, garden patio thing? And you've approved it for one purpose, but it's not really there for food production. It's there for enjoyment and a new amenity to a home. How much should be allowed should be attached or detached, but it's still in process. There certainly is no prohibition, but right now you'd have to compete for FAR or have to be part of the FAR allowed to your house.
To your house?
Yeah. So, but someone who is granted 5750 by right and then can buy TDRs has a lot of FAR potentially to use. But again, its code is in work. And that's a great thought, though, that we should have Cindy make sure to talk to the Open Space Board at some level about the food production goals while they're crafting that, making sure it's not too bifurcated.
Yeah, I would just add that we have also identified this, George, as an issue, and it was one of that we ended up with more of a question mark as to what does it mean to support local food production, local agriculture. Do we end up going down an industrialized landscape, which is not necessarily in the open space interest? So we've identified it as an issue that needs more attention, and of course working with ComDev, because we're aware that they're working on code amendment from that side of the table as well. So there's pros and cons to food production in greenhouses and whether they're temporary structures or permanent structures, and so it's an issue we'll have to deal with.
Michael?
Now, I appreciate open space efforts on food production, but really, from my point of view, the the limiting factor of food production is not the availability of land around here. It's the cost of labor. That's the limiting factor. So there's plenty of land available for food production. It's subsidized by tax incentives. So on a ranch, say, if you get $20,000 worth of tax savings by keeping it in agriculture, you would have to actually be able to produce much more than that in terms of land. So in terms of food costs. So if you could make $40,000 selling potatoes, you might consider converting it to food production. But then you have the labor involved, and can you pay someone $15,000 a year so you can gain $5,000 worth of profit? Is that worth your while? Because you're competing against the actual cost of food that's available in the market. So that's the dilemma of food production in the valley. And when you produce potatoes for alcohol production, that's not food production. That's alcohol production, which takes it out of the field of feeding people. And but you have dealt somewhat with the value-added costs of alcohol, because people are willing to pay that premium for alcohol. But I would suggest to you that producing alcohol is not a particularly noble endeavor. So that's the problem.
It's food for some people.
Yeah, sure, add a few olives, that's a meal.
Okay, I just want to bring us back on track, though, because we have about 35 minutes left. And so we had a couple items that you wanted to discuss, get a little feedback on, but I think we could all say that it's been a very busy and highly productive year for the board, and we appreciate all your service and all the staff's hard work to fulfill those goals.
Thank you.
Why don't you lead us into the next items?
Hey, thanks, Rachel. Well, we do have two things that we need direction on, and they are defining a public process for selecting a bridge design in Brush Creek, number one, and number two, deciding where we're going with the naming of our mountain park.
Okay.
So I guess we have about 15 minutes for each topic. I'll start with the bridge discussion. I think everyone now knows the story of how we got where we are. We had the temporary use of adjoining private lands with an existing bridge, and that temporary use now has come to an end, and we need to put our own bridge up. We've got a plan view of how this bridge needs to go in the packet, and so we know the length of it. The question is, what will the design look like? The county still owns 3 sections of the old Maroon Creek pedestrian bridge, and that gives us one option. Our engineer, Pete Loris, is estimating that using that bridge would cost us around $300,000, a little bit less, and putting a new one on in that same span length would just about double the cost. The reason these are so expensive is that our span is up 140 feet, and at that length, bridges become sort of exponentially more expensive as the free span increases. At that span, you'll notice in the renderings in the package, the new bridge is about 8 feet tall when you look at it from the side, and the old bridge that we own is 12 feet, so there's a 4-foot difference there. But what we want today is not to make a final decision about what to do with this. But the Open Space Board today said they are recommending using the less expensive bridge, with the caveat that we have this public process, as also recommended by staff, where we make the 2 renderings and the engineering estimates available to the public. We host a meeting on this, we consult with the Snowmass Town Council, and bring the comments back. The one nuance that the Open Space Board added this morning is that the final design would then come back through Open Space and to the county commissioners rather than directly to the commissioners. The staff goal is to get a final decision by mid-February so that we then have time to perfect our permitting through the Planning and Zoning Commission in the hopes of getting this bridge put in as close to April 1st as we can, which is the date that we're allowed to reopen the Brush Creek Trail. So what we want, again, is just comments on the public process that we need to follow to get this done.
Board? Michael?
We had that meeting with Snowmass Town Council, and they were not particularly concerned about the design of the bridge and just thought it should go in, which I found surprising. So I think it would be appropriate to have a public meeting at Snowmass Town Council and let the public, because there were no public members at that meeting, and let the public have some input, and then just call it a day, quite frankly.
Jack?
First a question, Dale. I understood that we hired a consultant to do renderings. So we have one rendering?
They're different.
No,
There's three different pictures.
Well, what we have here,
I anticipated if we hired a consultant a lot more, and it looks conveniently drawn to look like the other bridge. I anticipated a bridge consistent with the bridge that we put at the head of the valley.
Oh, so you're talking about the comparison bridge so this is using the old Maroon Creek, but you would like to see renderings of what a different bridge could look like?
I anticipated we were going to try to be consistent. Snowmass Village has, in several different places, a bridge analogous to the bridge at the entrance to Snowmass at the beginning of the county trail, on 7 Star. They have just a little bit away the same kind of design. I thought that's the design that we were looking here for consistency.
For page 2, the second one.
It's all the same to me.
Okay, we've seen 3 hands go up at once, including Lindsay's in the back. Lindsay, why don't you come on up and join Dale? And then, John, why don't you make your comment first?
Yeah, so Jack, actually the second, and they do look very, very similar. The second drawing, I asked the same question, I think, when I first saw these, but the second drawing is what the bridge would look like if it were a prefab bridge, like the one just below the roundabout. The difference is the sides are a lot higher because of the span of the bridge, and so they're at 8 feet versus, I think, the one just down below the roundabout is probably around 3 or 4 feet. I'm not really sure if even...
Lindsay can answer.
Yeah.
Lindsay knows everything.
Okay.
Well, I'm not positive on the height of the existing one, but I would say it's between 6 and 8. But the deck probably sits higher in it, if that makes sense. So as the user on the bridge, the railings appear lower, although the overall height of the structure is probably 6 to 8. Again, just to reiterate the point, the span is what drives how beefy the structure gets, and because those ones I think are about 80 feet, this is 144, everything just has to be bigger.
Well, the Woody Creek Bridge was very analogous to the Snowmass Bridge uphill, and that didn't look like this.
And that one is about 110. So everything just exponentially starts to grow.
Yeah, but I don't see why, and I'm not an engineer, and I understand structure. I've dealt with structure my whole life as far as construction. But I don't see why the design dramatically changes, and you got to have a rendition that looks like the Maroon Creek Bridge. There's something out of place here, and I don't have any idea why we don't have a rendition that looks analogous to the Woody Creek Bridge and the one uphill. I understand that structure dictates different things, but these bars and all of that, it doesn't work for me. It's not what I expected, and not that I am running the show, I guarantee it.
Lindsay? Part of our goal was to keep it out of the riparian area. So we could go back and look at having multiple spans, but we would need to put a support into the riparian area. And that was also a reason that kind of drove the elevation of the deck within the structure, was we push the whole bridge down and we'd start having to construct into the repairing area. So that was just part of the reason why it kind of sits in the landscape the way it does right now.
Yeah, I just don't see 30 feet dictate this kind of design. That's my bottom line.
Well, maybe we can get a little more documentation as to why the engineering is like that to satisfy those questions, because if Jack is asking them now, others will ask it later. Is this a fair portrayal of the difference of the two bridges? So
Basically additional renderings.
or at least the documentation that backs up, could it be done differently, and if so, what would it be?
Yes, analogous, if possible, the place to start is something consistent with what's uphill.
What would you like to see, Jeff?
I just said, the bridge that's uphill, and it's much shorter, I understand, but it's compatible with what's done in Snowmass Village throughout, and even within 100 yards of this bridge, Snowmass paid for their own bridge across Brush Creek, just as you go by the roundabout. And so I anticipated that we would be in the same vein. And if it's engineeringly impossible, then I need to know, but that question needs to be asked first.
Let's, Gary.
Because I'm the one who helped design that bridge up by Snowmass. This is almost exactly the same bridge. It's just where the deck is going to be on that bridge is going to be in a different position, because the one up by Snowmass, the deck was allowed to be higher because we were able to clear the riparian area there. Here, to clear it at 144 feet, we had to push the deck all the way to the bottom of the rails. So if you look at the Brush Creek Bridge up by Snowmass, it has almost an 8-foot railing. It just doesn't feel that way because the deck was pushed higher. So this is exactly the same. It's 14 feet wide. It's almost exactly the same type of structure. And it's just that the deck is now pushed, so you have higher railings, and the railings are beefier because of the length of this span. So the railings themselves are going to be a little beefier. They're thicker than the ones up there. And I think we can easily get an engineer to explain the differences in construction, and I think it's a good idea to get that explanation, because if the public does ask, we can explain all of this through, our engineer and then through us, and it'll help make more sense of that. The only little difference I saw was potentially the color, that it was a rusted metal on the upper one, and this one's more black, but otherwise it's almost the same exact bridge. I mean, we don't want to change that design because, obviously a prefabricated bridge, we like our designs. The one by Snowmass is a much smaller span, so their members are much narrower. So, but I think we can easily get an explanation.
Okay.
So when we go to the public process, they understand that. Because if you're not understanding it, the public won't either.
And I think the main question, although getting the presentation right is important, is do we agree with the public process of a meeting in Snowmass and explaining the pros and cons and financial differences. I would agree with that going forward with the public process. And the one thing I will ask, but really saying I'm not an engineer, is I have wondered, is there any way to modify the old segments of the Maroon Creek Bridge, at least so they're just not so boxy? I mean, I was just kind of looking at, is there a way to do an angle entrance, the way you kind of see at some older bridges, and if there was a way to take off that edge that's squared up and just bring some new structural steel supports in, would any modification of that bridge make it more acceptable without equaling the cost of a new bridge anyhow? But that's just a question for you guys to think about and answer later. Tim, I saw your hand up.
Just on the public process point, we had talked about, this has to then go to P&Z, notice to adjacent landowners, but we talked about giving notice to Brush Creek Village and adjacent landowners and whatever about the meeting at CNS Town Hall or whatever, just so that that valley can come and participate.
Thank you, that's good. So let me go back to the rest of the board. Agreed with public protest with the meeting in Snowmass to start this and try to get as many accurate background information as possible. Discussion of why we need to move the bridge and why the timelines are important and everything like that as well. So that seems to be clear.
One last question for staff. This rendition of the Maroon Creek bridges, is it going to have to be beefed up to make this span? You know, yeah, that's an engineering question. Because why does this have less metal than this?
We can ask the engineers that. I know that they're supporting it underneath the structure, which isn't visible. It's also a taller structure, so it has more strength there. But we can have all that clarified.
I mean, one of the biggest things is with the box. The box helps the overall support, because we were talking about this originally when we were looking at reusing this. And the reason why the members don't have, there's a ton of metal in that Maroon Creek Bridge, and it's the box all the way around that helps provide structure. So, but that's a really good question, and that's something that I want to get the engineer also to explain in more detail, because that's going to be, it'll be definitely asked.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. And then the next item is the Mountain Park naming.
Right. So moved. And adjourned. I see we have one of the Snowmass trustees who's joined us as well.
John, if you'd like to come up a little bit more. You participated in the naming committee as well, as I given the creativity in the community. Okay, go ahead.
Well, the staff input on this is really pretty simple. I staffed this ad hoc committee on the naming, and they struggled at the final meeting to make a selection. In the end, a motion was passed to recommend to the county commissioners that you accept the results of the public survey that are also depicted in your packet. There was an acknowledgement that we did not achieve a sort of a grand enthusiasm community-wide about the names that were chosen. And staff, regardless of the outcome of that process, would urge that we need to have a name that we can use on the public information which we are sending out almost weekly on this, and that if we don't choose something, we were essentially choosing to leave the name with the landowner of the middle piece, the Drosties. And I know there's lots of views about that, but one feeling I have about it is it's really not fair to the assemblage here. The Drosty property was 840 acres. The total that we are now planning is 2,500 acres, and therefore I would urge the board to choose something that we can use in our public outreach following the meeting today and going forward, so that we can teach everyone what the name of this mountain park will be.
And you talked about that. No, go ahead.
I'm drawing my mental blank.
What we did just an hour ago in our own meeting, we had a brief conversation to try to make this a little easier. You know, every trail, every place that people recreate generally ends up with one name. People go to Sunnyside, they go to Smuggler, they ski Ruthie's, or whatever it is. It doesn't usually have four names. And so what we thought about since the community process, we'd come up with Sky as the common name in these two that are in your memo, just shortening it and referring to the Sky Ridge Trail and the Sky Mountain Park, because the dominant experience when you're all along the ridge line at the top looking at Seven Star and looking at all the two valleys that have been conserved over 20 years, is that you have this huge panorama of sky and everything else, and that's just, it's a way to try to give Gary and the staff an ability in every notice, in every week, in signage, in every way, some direction today, rather than going back to a design by committee, a better name.
Okay.
I mean, that's, for your consideration.
Thank you. Jack, you are our board appointee to this. What, you want to offer any comments?
Yeah, and with due respect to everyone that participated and spent the time to come to like 3 meetings and take numerous, I'm sure, bits of feedback from the public, I think we got off track in the beginning because we had come up with a process that said, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, and people will submit names, and we'll pick out of the group of names submitted the finalists. But we didn't follow our own advice, because then all of a sudden we had potential names like Let It Be and, pop culture names and Whiskey Ridge, etc. And so we got off, from what we said we'd do, we didn't follow through. Then we got to the meeting, and we came up with these various names, as I've just indicated. The piece that was supposed to go to the schools was found to be very difficult. It was a good idea, but not having input that early enough to get into the school modus, as it were, we really didn't benefit from Mick's idea in that. So we ended up with some names, and I think the public, even though the sample is only about 200 on each, they clearly didn't like pop culture, didn't like those kind of things. And at the end of the day, I think Skyline was chosen as the Ridge name. And that's okay. No, that was the Mountain Park. I apologize. That was the Mountain Park name. We broke the rules the first time, so I'm inclined to believe we can do whatever the heck we want now. Let's be consistent. And for me, a submission by I think it's Art Bear. He said that the Ridge name ought to be Skyline, and I kind of tuned into that because of what also occurs in Somas Village. There's Lowline, there's Midline, and Highline, and this is Skyline. So for me, the name of the Ridge, the top Ridge Trail ought to be Skyline. It just seems to fit. But then we're taking the name that was meant for the whole park. So to me, it's up in the air, and I absolutely agree with staff in that we should not prolong this process. I think collectively, or even the BOCC ought to just make a decision, because I agree with Dale in that this thing can continue to be the landowner's name, Drosty, forever, and I think we prefer collectively to wean that name out of this.
Thank you.
So, due to the lack of consistency, I would continue to be inconsistent and make some decisions.
John, let me ask you again, because you are on the naming committee, but we are getting a little closer on time. So.
Well, I went into the process understanding the same things, and actually my 2 favorite names were the ones that were picked by the public in the online poll. And I like Skyline. I think it's a great name. It represents what I feel like when I get up on top of there, and it does follow the consistency of using the word line somewhere in the name. The high line, low line. We're talking about different other names like the trail that's going to go around the cemetery, Deadline, flatline. So, I mean, I like having the name line somewhere in there. How you guys, we kicked it back to the county commissioners because we didn't come to consensus. Other than we agreed that that was what we supported, and we're leaving it up to you guys to really come up with a name that you think is appropriate. And I agree with Jack, we need to get a name that we can refer to it as. And the Snowmass Trails Committee actually named the new trail that was built from the roundabout up to the High Point view line. And we're going to be going to print with our trails map. And so, the sooner we can get this resolved, the sooner we can get it printed, the sooner we get it on the website, the better off we're all going to be.
I also served on that ad hoc committee and I would second both sets of comments here. One of the things that occurs to us, and that I think a landscape architect mentioned this to me the other day, is you may build a sidewalk with a square corner before people start to use your property, and then people will walk where they walk, and that's where you need to think where. So this is a process where as people get to use this park, that single word name will come to the fore, and it'll be interesting to see in 2 to 5 years what people are actually calling this place and what they're using it. But I certainly support using a single word name for the place. I just wanted to point out, we did decide to kick this back to you guys without a super firm recommendation. I think the term we used was, this has got lukewarm public support. And when I look at these numbers, I see that 60% of the votes came in were for something else on the Ridge Trail name, and 56% of the votes that came in were for something else on the Mountain Park name. So that's really puts it back into the Board of County Commissioners' laps with, and I would say you guys have the freedom to, the buck stops here sort of a thing. You guys get the
Well, now, if we have instant runoff voting, maybe one of these
this is why they pay you the big bucks here, to make the tough calls.
Okay. Tim,
Can I just ask John and Jack a question? Because you both are Snowmass Village residents and officials and all. This memo says Skyline View. Are you okay with just Skyline Mountain Park? And this says Open Sky Ridge Trail. You okay with Skyline Trail?
Yeah.
Just Skyline on both of them? I mean, it's just simpler, and that's what people, you don't like that, Jack?
It'll stick.
Skyline will.
okay, well, let Jack answer. And John.
Well, John, let John go first.
Boy, we're kicking things around a lot.
I'm hedging my bets on this one.
I think Skyline would resonate with the communities both in Snowmass and Aspen. I mean, it's become a community park. And I really think that when you say I'm going to be doing Skyline today, people will know immediately what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the nice way to put it. Jack? And then we're going to go to the rest of the board.
I like Skyline for the trail. For me, and the reason why this has come to fore before us all these years going back till the 80s is because of the wildlife. So, I am prejudiced and I can't move off my preference, which was Elk Mountain. Second, I like Skyline. That's good too, So, really, it's a toss-up. But out of convenience, I wouldn't make a decision. What's in your heart? What's your gut tell you? And so that's why I had to mention the Elk Park.
Okay. George?
It was mentioned earlier that when we think about, I think Tim, you talked about when we think about where we're going to go today or where we're going to hike, well, we're going to go up Smuggler, or we're going to go wherever. And that name, defines where, and people understand what you mean. And so I really like that idea that it seems like the Open Space and Trails Board came up with was Skyline, because where are you going today? We're going up to Skyline, we're going up to Smuggler, we're going on the Rio Grande. So for me, that makes a lot of sense, and it's simple, and it ties in with the name of Skyline Ridge. So I would support that.
Michael?
The whole purpose of this was to pass the agony that people can sustain. and to pass it back.
I didn't even vote.
I was waiting for someone to make that comment.
So, given that it's a number of properties, I like assembly line. But I'll go with Skyline.
Oh, Ron?
I like Skyline as well. I would go with Skyline Ridge as opposed to just Skyline Trail, because I think the definitive factor of that upper portion is that ridge portion of that trail, and Skyline Mountain Park.
Yeah. Given our time constraint, we may as a board need to continue to discuss this. I appreciate the work that has occurred with everyone who put their time in on the committee. That's not easy. And, thank heavens we weren't all trying to name a baby or something. That would be way worse. But, for me, I like Skyline Ridge to name the ridge. I would rather keep it simple and have it Sky Mountain Park for the park itself. I don't like, I guess I always think of the Skyline Drive in the Blue Mountains, and that just, what are we doing with the Skyline Mountain out in the middle of Colorado? But Sky Mountain Park, I think, is perfect because you are, in the clouds practically, and the view is so perfect. And I think names get shortened too, and so I'm trying to think who came up with Ajax instead of Aspen Mountain Ski Area. You go to Ajax, you don't go to Aspen Mountain. So just for me, I can see having the Skyline Ridge as a trail consistent with the lines used name, but then to keep the name of the larger area more simple and just go with Sky Mountain Park. But that's me. Jordan?
And that's what I had said as well.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
No, I said, you go up Smugly, you're going up Sky.
Okay.
Going down Rio Grande. So I don't think we need to have a
larger discussion.
You got 5 minutes, you can finish.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I was monkeying but so that would be my suggestion: is Sky Mountain Park and Skyline Ridge. And so you go to Sky Mountain to go up to Skyline Ridge.
Yeah, I like the sky part and taking the line out. That helps me a lot.
For the name of the mountain. The mountain's not a line, it's a mountain.
It'll be called Skyline.
It will?
Yeah, that's what we'll stick.
Okay, well, so Skyline Ridge and Sky Mountain, and then if people start nicknaming it something else, we'll adapt over time.
Is that consensus here?
Let me see. Sky Mountain, Skyline Ridge.
Michael?
Well, you know how I feel, but I'll go along with it.
That's 10.
Well, congratulations.
Wow. Skyline Assembly Ridge.
That was very close. Okay, so that's...
I like Skyline.
We need a vote.
That's a work session.
Well,
I think
we've given direction to staff to follow through.
Make it so.
I think it's administrative, but we may want to do a resolution or proclamation at some point to formalize it.
I would say that, yeah. It's certainly going to be formalized by the newspaper article.
Yeah. Because we've talked about so many different lines and skies and everything right now.
If you formalize it, I think your resolution should ask everyone wherever they are at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, December 27th to celebrate.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Is that when the dotted line?
We closed.
That's
the year of the Grupo.
that's been tremendous progress of something of this magnitude in less than a full year. Let alone the work that went into getting it. But I think no, the management plan, the trail building, everything else is gone into it. So okay, we seem to be somewhere. That's settled. Was there anything else that you had to bring forward, or other members wanted to bring forward? We have a couple minutes left as we close out the meeting.
Just once again, from the point of view of staff, we love working on this program, and we feel like we had a great year. And this year was unusual in that our energies were absorbed more in the management side and the planning side, and We did one nice acquisition this year, which was the conservation easement on the Middle Ranch, which really came through the community development process. But thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone, and we'll, I guess, recess our meeting, because we're in still a special meeting, and we'll come back this afternoon for the rest of our agenda. And if you guys need motions to come out of your meeting and adjourn, please do so.
Motion to adjourn the open space board meeting.
Second?
Second it.
All fair? Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it very much.
That's pretty cool.
Merry Christmas, Al. You like to do what's all the article.
Clean. The first one is really seeking the board's consent for an administrative action. And it's an administrative action to use a small portion of this year's budget savings to provide an end-of-the-year bonus for employees. What we are proposing is a net $300 bonus for full-time employees and then a $150 bonus for part-time employees, and we can talk about the mechanics of that. Currently, we're projecting to end the year $535,000 ahead of budget. We had projected a surplus, I believe, of $750,000 when we adopted the budget. We're coming in $535,000. Right now, we're projecting even ahead of that. The cost of the bonus is estimated to be just over $69,000 for all funds. Just over $46,000 of that would be from the general fund, and a little bit over $22,000 for our other special revenue funds. We don't need any additional appropriations to do this, which is why it's really consent on an administrative action. Nor will it change our beginning fund balance estimates for 2012. We're coming in a little bit better than we even projected when we started building the 2012 budget that we'll be considering in your next item. And so really what we're seeking today is consent to the board to go ahead and take this administrative action to use these budget savings for what I think is a pretty modest but meaningful end-of-the-year bonus for our employees.
Okay. Just to kind of amplify on that for a second, we have not done any sort of end-of-the-year bonus for the past 2 years?
2 years, the county has had a pay freeze that's included no end-of-the-year bonuses and no increases to employee salaries over the course of the year. In the past, the county has done end-of-the-year bonuses ranging from what we found anywhere from $500 to $600. So this is lower than those, but still, I think, a meaningful step.
Okay, and when you say net, you're then talking about doing enough of a bonus that by the time taxes and other withholding is taken out, it runs up right around $300.
Exactly, so that the check a full-time employee gets is going to be $300, part-time employee $350.
Okay. But then I'm trying to think, the cash in the check would be $300, but it would say more like the gross would be higher and then have those deductions. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Okay, board members, Rob?
Just an odd question that popped into my head. Does filing status affect the gross amount that each employee would get? Meaning one employee would get more than another based on the filing status?
The gross will be different, and also, because we're not in Social Security after 6 months, it's actually going to be a little higher for employees in the first 6 months of employment.
And what we had considered doing was doing different amounts depending, the employees were in their first 6 months, the gross amount would actually be higher, so that whether they're in their first 6 months or after that, it would still net to 300.
Because they have a Social Security deduction from their
That's
paychecks
right.
in the first 6 months of it.
And typically, when we do a bonus, the way it goes through payroll is that it is not immediately taxed for federal and state. It gets added onto an employee's W-2, their total taxable amount for the year, but it is not taxed for federal and state at the time it is given. So that way it is able to come out as a full round number.
So then that sounds like it's not net number, because if it's getting, if you're paying $300 and it's not getting taxed till later, they're going to be paying the tax on that on their tax return.
Yes, it is considered taxable income, so they do have to pay federal and state. What they're not being taxed, what it is net of at the time it's given, is unemployment and Medicare.
Okay. So not state or federal income tax.
Which is less than 2%. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in terms of the general,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. And in terms of the general concept as opposed to the mechanics, which I'll let smarter minds deal with, what are people thinking?
I'm supportive of it. I'm glad that we're able to do this. I know that staff has worked diligently the last couple of years in putting a sharp pencil to their budgets to offset what we've been asking them to do. And so I think it's nice that we're able to recognize them for that effort and for the continuing work that they provide all of us, all the citizens. So I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to weigh in? Rob?
Yeah, I'm supportive of it, and I'd just, for the record, like to say why, because I think in managing good fiscal responsibility, part of that is maximizing our assets. And it's clear within most or all organizations, our employee base are our primary and most valuable asset. And the small amount of morale that this will bring to the employee base, I think, is crucial. You know, over the year that I've been here, I've seen some incredible work in cost savings as reflected in the additional $500,000 in our budget. And, you know, first thing that came to mind when I thought about that was, you know, let's give a little bonus back to the people that are paying taxes too. But the reality is that that money is going to stay in our fund balance, and we're going to be good stewards of that money, and we're going to continue to be fiscally responsible here. And this small little gesture to our employees that have not seen a raise in a 2-year period of time, I think is crucial for morale and productivity to, as I said, our most important asset.
Okay, thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I'm going to support this. I had a good conversation with John trying to go through the different mechanizations in my brain through, you know, line items in the budget, as it were. And though the year-end carryover over and above what we might have projected in the budget might sound like a big number, it's probably pretty typical of an annual operating budget. But the bottom line is simply to say thanks for a job well done.
Yeah. No, I can only agree. I think it's a modest amount. I can think of my years as an employee for another company, and when you got a little bonus, it was suddenly either a little more under the tree for the kids or some outstanding bill you were finally able to take care of, and it's well appreciated, and I think it is a nice thank you. So, and I know this was administrative. John, did not per se have to bring it to us, but I think it's appropriate that he did, and that we give our consent going forward, especially since this is not a appropriation from supplemental of any sort. And I think it's, in terms of transparency and openness, it's very reasonable. Thank you. That's direction on that. What's the other item you have for us?
All right, the other item actually came up during our last open discussion, and it has to do with direction on the board's discretionary fund.
Okay.
And so what I'm handing around to you now is some history. The first page is what you've spent this year in the discretionary fund and what's left over. And then as you flip through, you'll see 2010, 2009, 2008, 2007, and 2006. So you can kind of get an idea as a board how you've used your discretionary fund in past years, what you've done at year end. I think one of the differences that you'll see is that in 2011, you have a much higher balance left than you typically have in past years. And again, this is your discretionary fund as a board. You could decide to distribute that in any way that you want, or you could make a decision to distribute a portion of it and let a portion of it go back to fund balance. However the board wants to use these funds, these are completely at your discretion. So I wanted to bring this back for open discussion and see if there's some direction from the board.
And then we would prepare something for the regular meeting coming up on the 22nd as well?
Well, this is already appropriated funds again, so the board could give, again, it's more of an administrative action where the board can just give direction. If you'd like a formal order to be brought back, you can do that.
Okay. Well, I think this is good for us to have some discussion now. I do think, given that Michael's been a little delayed coming back, to make a final decision should be with all five of us. But that doesn't mean we can't parlay around some ideas and try to move it forward first. So let me just put that on the floor. I saw Rod's hand go first and come around the table.
Yeah, just the first question, if we decide to carry over, put this money that goes back into the general fund for general use, is that the way it works? And then next year we actually have budgeted an additional $10,000 already worked into our budget for whatever discretionary funding we choose as a board?
That's correct. And so this would go into, if we go back to that fund balance chart, I guess the blue fund balance, where it's really discretionary, it's not reserved for any particular purpose.
Yeah.
But you have $10,000 appropriated if you pass the budget during our next item for use next year.
Yeah, it does not roll over, so we will not have a larger fund next year. That's a good question. George, you were next?
Yeah, thank you. What I would like to do is see if there are any nonprofit organizations that are in need coming into the winter season, whether it's a homeless shelter or Lift Up or any other ones that really come to the surface that perhaps didn't get all of the dollars they had requested from the Health and Community Fund, but they have that need. But then in addition, I also don't feel that there's a need to actually disperse all these dollars as well. And I think that we should look at what is needed, what is sort of a reasonable amount, and then I would support the remaining of those dollars to flow back into the general fund if there isn't any really outstanding, urgent need for. But I'd like to try to figure out, and maybe we could have some guidance and some help from perhaps some of our health and human service staff with some of those ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the bottom line might be the same as George's approach, as I would like to distribute it in three ways. I really, instead of involving the staff and getting involved in an analysis, because everyone can always, all nonprofits always need more, I really feel very much connected to the benefit for the homeless shelter and the food bank, the baguette, I'm not sure if we still call it that. Last year, it was Aspen Community Foundation Baguettes Fund, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like contributing extra money to those two, and the remainder would go back to the general fund. It's a unique situation for this year, and great. But I would like to make a dent in the balance, and I'm not coming up with a number at this point. But for a homeless shelter and food bank, those are such basic human needs of shelter and food that my heart reaches out there.
Okay, Michael, we've been handed out...
Whatever you decide is fine.
No, we already said we were just going to start passing ideas along. No. We've just begun this one. We talked about other issues before then. But this is the way the funds have been used in the past, and we've just started a conversation. I know other communities where, especially when there's a larger amount like this, they can kind of say, well, each of the 5 commissioners or 3 commissioners, whatever, can pick a fund or a nonprofit and allocate it that way, do something like that. I'm not really suggesting that, but I know other communities that have done that, and that way, when you're aware of individual needs, you can have that chance to put something forward. I kind of think a group decision is best. I line up with, I think, Jack and George in terms of the homeless shelter and the food bank as being real need type of situations. And the food bank, I do try to take things down there periodically when I've been able to do some good coupon shopping and get some good bargains for people and make my dollar go a little further. And, it's ironic, you'll go in sometimes, and maybe this time of year, they're really pretty well stocked. They've got a lot of donations at the market and things like that. You'll go in there in April, and it might be pretty lean, and they're very thankful that new things came in that they'll have. And so, I would personally see doing something to the food bank, but also making it more than just a right here at Christmas, saying maybe, we'll allocate $1,500 now and $1,500 in April, so they can start their off-season, because off-season tends to be a time when they really get hit pretty heavily. Something like that. So, I don't feel a need, as others have said, to allocate the entire amount. But the other thing I had thought about was the Emergency Assistance Fund that NAN and Health and Human Services administers in the course of the year. And that's, I think, $40,000 has been allocated. During the first couple of years of our really hard times, she had to come back in for more in the course of the year, and we allocated more. It might be something that, allocating another $2,000 there increases her fund by 5%. And if she doesn't use it by the end of the year in 2012, then it would return to the general fund. So that would be a different way to look at it as well. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. So those are just thoughts I have. Rob, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, the first one is really just trying to get some feedback, some understanding right now for myself in terms of, how people know about this discretionary fund, how items have come up in the past. Is it usually the board members that bring a community need, or is it people? Is there an application form for this?
No, I think it's kind of twofold. Perhaps if somebody individually is approached and it's not in the budget, you can always say, well, we do have a small discretionary fund if you'd like to come in and make a presentation or make an application, and let people know when people call and say there's an emergency or something. In general, it's just people asking the board to do something. They don't really think of targeting it per se to the discretionary fund, just asking whether we could make a general fund appropriation or something, some way to help. So no, we don't have an application form.
In follow-up with that, I will say, looking back through the various years, of course, I was not on the board for any of these years, I really tend to like the things that are a little unusual and kind of show support towards, whether it be a model UN or a livestock sale with got a small $100 or a contribution in memory of someone, kind of and I have a little bit of a problem with this becoming a fund that crosses over with already a dedicated tax that we have, and trying to liquidate some of the balance when there is a dedicated tax to our healthy community. And I could see giving a little bit away at the end, and I'm not against that per se, but I think as Jack said, I think every nonprofit out there would say they're still in need and their needs are not being met fully. So how do you make a decision? Well, we have a process on how to give away tax dollars already through our Healthy Community Fund in that regard. So I don't see a problem with saying, all right, well, we didn't get much request this year, let's carry over most of it, or not carry over, but let's put it back into our fund, save it, and use that stewardship of the remaining money to what we might find is the benefit of the community at a later date.
And I'm going to ask a question, because you're pointing something out. We've kind of always given this $100 to the junior livestock sale at the state fair. And I don't know if we had discussed it last year, that we do it every year, it's not really discretionary, and it became built into our budget, or we just miss a year this last year. I really don't know that. And, because that does strike me as unusual. That's a Colorado Counties, Inc. thing. All the counties chip in. They try to buy, one or two animals from the different regions, actually. They'll bid up the highest bull or something. But that does strike me as unusual. And the other thing, I know I had mentioned it to John earlier in the year, and I don't know what happened to it, but in the past we had kind of donated something for, was it the Veterans Lunch at the Hickory House? And that we had, again, started talking about, well, why don't we make this kind of an annual part of our budget rather than a request that they have to come in for the Veteran and Memorial Day services to ask us for money. And so...
Isn't that lunch at the Elks? Well, the Marine birthday is November 10th, and so they have a Marine, we sponsor the Marine anniversary lunch at the Hickory House. They invite everybody. Any veteran.
And I think that's been built in, but I may need to double check that.
Yeah. So, that's part of why maybe there's more left, is that things that we realized are not really discretionary. They were coming up as an annual expense, and we're starting to get built into the budget. The one other thing that did strike me as being worth checking in on is just kind of how are we doing with our BOCC travel budget for this year. And I bring that up primarily because Rob has taken such an active role with Northwest Council of Governments, and that's good. It's very good. But in the past, so many of those expenses were covered because Patty was chair, and so she never had to pay for a hotel or the that in that sense. And I just wasn't sure because I want to make sure those broader regional commitments continue. So I'm just not sure where we've ended up on that type of thing.
The board is not exceeding its budget. I'm not sure about that particular line item off the top of my head, Rachel, but overall the board is under budget, which would indicate that.
Okay, so it should be sufficient for next year as well. Okay, that's all. I just wanted to kind of ask those questions.
Just for
please, Rob.
A target place, I would say let's allocate 1,000 or 1,500 towards, 2 or 3 different organizations to finish out the year and put the rest back into the general fund, just to start a talking point. That's what I would say.
Okay. I could, I would well want to support 1,500 to the food program and to the homeless shelter. I'm not sure, it may be, again, then 1,500 to Nan's emergency fund, so she'd have 3% more, but that's just me. And then put the rest back in the general fund. So, what are others thinking? Michael?
I think the food bank and the homeless are good as a basis. And I would actually like to make sure that we fund the Marine anniversary lunch. I don't think we do. And they ask for it. Typically, the veterans don't ask for money because they don't want to ask for money. But but they're grateful if we donate it. So I'd like to continue that, and I'd also like to continue the funding for the taping of the veterans' stories, the history project, to whatever amount.
Rachel, just to be clear, I was saying 1,500 as a total,
Okay,
not 1,500 to each organization.
okay, I got you. Okay, I'm glad you clarified that. George?
So, looking at the last few years, I don't see any allocations to those entities Michael just spoke about. So is it already taken care of in our budget somewhere else as a line item?
George, I need to double check that, because I don't know off the top of my head. I think Michael is indicating he doesn't believe that contribution has.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I would go along with Rachel. I would support the contribution of $1,500 for the Baguettes Fund and $1,500 for Lift Up, and then if we need to allocate some of those some dollars to the Marine luncheon and to the vet program, the historic, the history. I think those are great community assets, and then the remainder I would just put back into the general fund.
So, to kind of get a number out there, would 600 towards the luncheon and the filming be a good number, or what type of number are we thinking?
I was thinking 250 and 500 for the filming.
Okay,
If we
so
could
750.
sort of make it a continual thing, I don't know. I guess this is discretionary, so it isn't continual. I don't know.
Jack?
Clarification. I'm aware of, but have never gone to the Hickory House, the Marine thing, but that's put on by the Marines, but open to all vets, of course, I would assume.
They invite people.
Okay, because I know the Elks do their specific dinner upstairs. Last time I went, it was really overflow, both rooms, etc. It was wonderful. Yeah, I can go 1,500, 1,500. I don't ever remember funding the Marine luncheon or the filming. It might be reasonable, but I would not want to say it's an annual appropriation, but it's for this year, and leave it for next year's discussion, because we don't know. This is a very unusual year. Since I've been here, we've never had just 3 requests.
Maybe the word got out there where our county was broke, which we've been pretty tight on everything.
Well, even the livestock one usually comes in early summer, and somehow
Yeah.
that didn't happen. So, we might think about it next year, but, I'll go along with 15, I guess 250. So that's Michael's recommendation, and the rest goes to the general fund, as opposed to what's already funded for the assistance fund. That went from 20,000 to 40,000, and fortunately it has worked. So
You just want to leave it as it is?
yeah.
Okay. It does strike me that we have had unusual things in last year's budget. We were in a salary freeze last year. The donation to charity was kind of an honorarium to Hillary and John Ely as our 2 employees that are hired by the board, but we did not want to break the salary freeze, so it did not go to them. It was to a charity of their choice. And I'm looking at that Picken County Cares reception, which I think we must have budgeted for better this year, because we didn't need an allocation from the discretionary fund to be able to host the citizens who are coming in for that celebration. So there's been some small reason why some of these have moved away, basically. But, so we have a proposal that would in total be $3,200 right now, if I'm keeping track.
3750?
Okay, wait, so yeah, you're right, 3750, sorry about that. So that would be more than half of the remaining discretionary fund would be going back to the general fund with this proposal.
Real close.
Real close. I understand what you were saying, Rob, too, and I just have to think about the generosity of St. Mary's of providing a homeless shelter. And if it weren't for the other partners who've come forward over the years to assist us with that, I see that amount really have been more of a burden on the county. And it's a kind of a gratitude to me gesture to them for continuing to do that. There was some question even this year as to whether they did that this year or not. It's got to be more wear and tear on their building and everything like that. And I think the food bank came in this year for the very first time for a very small donation from the Healthy Community Fund. And they do try to do that through all donations, but it's a little lean sometimes.
I would like to agree with you about the distribution for the money for the food bank.
To do it in
Maybe we could
chunks.
do it in a couple of segments, because you're right. I mean, now, and thankfully, Ruth and I make our own little contribution to Lift Up, which is very analogous. So this is the giving season, but it will get tougher down the road.
Yeah, so maybe that would come in
These
as
are the people who are most in need, I think.
Okay, so again, we have a proposal that's $1,500 to the homeless shelter, $1,500 to the food bank down on North Mill Station, whoever they're under now, because I'm not sure if they're under Lift Up or they're under Community Foundation anymore. 500 towards the filming and $250 to the Marines lunch. So the larger filming is through Grassroots TV. It's for all veteran stories.
Yeah, and Dick Merritt and the whole crew, they're the ones that really are help coordinating that, so that'd probably be the contact.
Okay,
Again, I just have a little trouble with, it's discretionary funds, so it's at our discretion any way we like, but it seems to me, in my mind, I'd like to have a process, and I could name 10 organizations that I think are all probably under budgeted this year, help our community, save the county money, and to be in one of the last meetings of the year and just start throwing out names without a systematic process for this, to me, I'm just a little challenged with that, being the first year trying to figure out how to use a discretionary fund. The money's not going to disappear if we hold on to it, so it just won't be in our discretionary fund, but I suppose if we wanted to, we could supplement our discretionary fund with a vote of the board next year if we wanted to anyway.
I'd be more worried about that precedent than...
I agree. But the point is I struggle with the process of just being here in this last meeting and all of a sudden in an open discussion saying, what are we going to do with this money? I don't think it's the role of government to find ways to get rid of its money. And I know these things are helping our community. So I struggle with it. But if that's what the board feels like doing, there are 4 people that are in favor of that, and I support all of those organizations. I particularly like the Marines and the taping of stories. I think those are fabulous things that, like I said, those are the interesting things. But the conflict with the Healthy Community Fund, we have a process through the Healthy Community Fund, and so I understand you guys supporting it at that level. I'm going to say that I'm under that level.
Okay, well, and I can understand that, and I would just say this is oddly the first time there's been anywhere near this sort of amount. And it's been, I think, a thought of the board that in the season of giving and at the end of the year, the coldest and darkest days of winter, it might be an appropriate time to assist with additional food and those who do not have a place to stay at night. And so that's why they've been chosen out of the 61 nonprofits as a way to assist further. So, okay, Michael, you find...
Well, Rob, this fund isn't really a way for us to get rid of our money. That's not the way it was structured. And I think that's an unfair characterization of why this fund is here. This fund is here because there are all these other structures within our government and within the community to make sure that people are taken care of. But it doesn't cover everything. And some years, you can see that there's unusual events in each one of these years passing of people that need to have a commemorative donation made. There are school events, there's all kinds of things. And this year has just been unusual because we haven't had, thank goodness, those kind of things happening. So, but we typically have supported the homeless shelter and the food bank, and that's the basis of it. And I'm comfortable with the way this fund is structured because we can't think of every possible scenario that somebody might need money, and so this is what this stands for. And not spending it all is an indication that we don't just give it away. That we're thinking about things. So I'm very comfortable with it.
Yeah. You know, I think the city used to have a $60,000 contingency fund, and then they reduced it to $40,000. But oddly enough, you would see specific staff projects come in for funding that would not be funded throughout the year, and I've never seen that in the county. And, you know, we had a number of different things that we turned down as buy-ups, and we could be re-reviewing those as well to say, should they go towards something like that. But again, this is returning fully half of the recessionary fund, the discretionary fund to the general fund, and making a small donation to those of most need. So.
And the bottom line here is discretionary, so we're opening our hearts a little more, and even if people have the ability to apply for a certain process, the Healthy Community Fund, you just know the two that we mentioned here have continuing, unending needs year-round.
Okay, so that's pretty much that, and it was a good airing of the issues. Other open discussion items that board members may have. George?
I picked up a quick email over lunch, and it was the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission.
Okay.
Is that the full name of it?
I think so.
They have voted to, in their new rules, for full disclosure for fracking.
Yes.
And so I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I know the board, we sent a strong letter in support of that. I know Rachel was down there with your comments, and it just came through from Senator Udall's office that which he supported strongly as well, that they've made that new rule. So full chemical disclosures.
Did it also include the quote trade secret or verification on it?
It didn't speak to that specifically.
It did. There's an out for them.
Okay. Well, they have to disclose it to someone, but it's not on the regular registry, and they were going to have...
Yeah, they'll disclose it in case of emergency or whatever.
Okay.
Anyway, I thought that was
great progress.
Well, it's progress. You know, the one comment I'd make on that is after testifying before the commission last Monday, had feedback from Northwest Council of Government QQ staff to say, you know, you really have to bear in mind that this is the beginning of additional rulemaking. There will be other things that come forward in the future. It's not the end of rulemaking. You know, on various other proposals that have been suggested. Boulder County had come up with, and I'm not sure they originated it, but they put it forward that, you know, there should be some sort of marker that could be injected in the fracking fluid of a given well that you could then trace, should there be further water problems later, which well was leaking, which frack didn't work. And, you know, so things like that will continue to be reviewed, and we can continue to seek improvements.
But I thought it's at least it's an acknowledgement that fracking may have some adverse impacts to our watershed.
Yeah.
And so this was certainly a first strong step in that direction.
That's great news. That really makes me feel better about that 11 o'clock drive home last Monday night. Because you really couldn't tell with the glazed over faces by the end of 11 hours of testimony. Okay, other open discussion items. Anybody have anything that they want to? Phyllis.
I have a quick one. Staff are attempting to clean some of the papers that we have upstairs, and there are 2 shelves and a metal cabinet of things in the commissioners' room, and I don't know if any of our current commissioners have things that are stored there or if they're stored elsewhere, but we're trying to get a handle on what's there.
Okay.
So if you could help
Either
us...
side in the back.
Right.
Yeah, not around the given desks.
Not around the desks, it's the 2 shelves, and that the metal cabinet seems to have things that have just gotten put in there because you can close the door and you don't see it. So between Christmas and New Year's, staff are going to be attempting to see what's there. So if you have anything that you'd like to keep, maybe if you took it off and put it on the couch or somewhere, so that...
Or maybe put some of those orange stickers up there we use with the dot games, and we can all put a dot on things on
That
the
would
shelves.
be great. Let's, we'll put an envelope with dots somewhere near there, and if you have something, and if otherwise, we're trying to, one, have found we have multiple copies of things that we don't think we really need, and we'll recycle everything, but it's...
Do you think staff could help me with my paperwork build up at home?
Maybe you do a transfer.
Yeah,
no, but maybe we'll have a training.
Okay, training, there you go.
And transfer to
Scan it
home.
and throw it. Okay.
Thank you.
And anybody else have a comment on that? No. We'll just look for the dots up there, and we'll try to use those. Okay. I know some people keep their desks so neat, they're not going to want to pile it up there over Christmas, if there is anything. Anything else that was open discussion?
The board doesn't have any more. I'll do one
Yeah,
more.
yeah, please, no, yeah, you're supposed to go first with all.
Yeah, well, I was just making sure I had time. This was one that could wait.
Okay, appreciate that.
CCI is asking for designation of proxy for the steering committees, and what the board has, did my hand around enough, George? What the board has typically done is appointed the county manager, so myself, as proxy on those steering committees, and in the case that the designated board member or members for CCI could not attend.
Yeah, when a
So
county
just-
commissioner, mayor, or council member is not in attendance.
Correct, yeah. And so just seeking guidance, if you want to continue doing that, we'll get this filled out and get it signed.
Clarification, I thought oftentimes we put Nan's name down for Health and Human Services?
I was just
Nan
thinking...
has been down for Health and Human Services, Jack.
So I don't know if we need the dual specific,
Yeah, we can do more
all
than
of
one
these and
form.
then just that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would agree with
Not that you really want to go down there for these meetings.
not so much. But thank you for pointing that out, Jack. And you guys have the ability to designate a different proxy for every one of the committees, if you'd like. But thank you for that correction. You're right, Nan was doing Health and Human Services.
Addition, not correction.
Yeah, and she does call in a lot, and I think she's taking more of a leadership role, so that would be good. I'm certainly fine with you being our proxy if there's no commissioners present. Anything else you can clear off your desk, John?
Just one thing, I'm drafting a quick email from the board to be sent by you, Rachel, about the bonus program. So maybe
Okay.
you could send that at the break, take a read of it and send it at the break.
Okay, thank you. If there is nothing else, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break until we are scheduled to reconvene for the special meeting at 2 o'clock on the budgets. Okay. Thank you, Gretchen. You know, John, how about I do that at the 3 o'clock break, because I want to go back down to my car and get the...
Give me time to actually write it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday the 13th. We're going to go into our special meeting now. We have already convened a special meeting from this morning, so we don't need any further motions for that. But before we do, there was one item that I wanted to read to the commissioners. I had a request to read this very short note from Eric Peltonen. Very hard to pronounce name for me. Apologize for that. I received this last night. To the county commissioners, now that this year-and-a-half-long legal ordeal is over, I want to thank you for supporting me financially as well as emotionally. I can never repay you for your help, and I will never stop being grateful. If there's one thing I have learned from my predicament, it is that this community is truly united in compassion and truth and takes care of its own. In appreciation, Eric. So, I have to pass that along to everyone, all of our staff who's worked, and I think we should maybe pass that copy back to John Ely and the legal department as well. Okay, now we will go into the other items that are scheduled for our special meeting, second reading and public hearing. The 3 resolutions concerning the 2012 budget. John and Connie and Tom Oken, if you guys would like to take it away for us.
Okay, we're here for the second reading of the 3 resolutions related to the budget and the mill levies. At last week's first reading, we had several requests for additional information related to mill levies and salaries, which we included in this week's packet. There's several charts. Otherwise, there haven't been any changes to what we reviewed last week. Are there any questions about the additional material?
Jack?
I've got an understanding of the last page, employee pay plan. Rachel, what was it that you asked for and that generated this? I mean, I had gone through my analysis, which this is just about the same. You know, it shows the annual increase for payroll, not including benefits, of course. Is this telling you what you needed to do?
Yeah, I don't really recall asking for additional information than myself, other than to kind of
Well, yeah, you might
do a
have
little more than averages.
reiterated what I was saying. But, so, separate of that, my question is number of employees. This doesn't track with my understanding of employees. I thought we have about 245 employees in this organization.
This is just the general fund.
Okay. And it says general fund too, but no one said I had both eyes open when I studied last night.
Okay, and then-
Okay, good.
John, there is a fluctuating by a small number of employees. If you'd like to elaborate on what that is. This is the last page, 19 of our...
Yeah, so the fluctuating number of employees are what we anticipate for either increases or decreases. Increases might be following, for example, the election cycles. We anticipate having more temporary employees, for example, on during a presidential election than we would during an off-year election. This year, we've also, the board, at least to date, has also approved some temporary positions. So, for example, three-year positions in Health and Human Services, and so those will be decreases in the out years. And so we try and take account of those fluctuations as we do our 5-year plan, and that's why you see the number of employees either going up or down.
Okay.
Depending on the year.
Does that answer your question that you had, Jack, about the, you were concerned it was a rate of increase?
Well, it really is not a question. My concern is just that the numbers that we escalate by. It starts out with the next year's budget, which is completely reasonable, and it's a 1.5% bonus results in a small increase from 11 I'll round everything off, 11.4 million to 11.5, but in the out year of 2016, goes from 12.2 to 12.8. That speaks for itself about, the 600,000, but it's $1.4 million from what it is in 2011. So it's just the escalation and the multiplier really bothers me about the out years, but we are approving a 2012 budget, and in fact, I'm comfortable and appreciative of all the work that has been done by John Peacock and staff at multiple levels, because I know this is an organizational project, and I think we go, the county, since I've been here, now getting towards my 11th year, has done a very good job managing its budgets. I was especially appreciative of the years when we were conservative and ended up with extra money. But in this day and age, you got to try to hit it right on, because we fine-tuned it very much such that level of service equates exactly to employees, which is our biggest expense, I believe. And so you got to be right on. We're not trying to create another, extra fund, a cash reserve somewhere. We have a healthy reserve over and above, of course, Tabor, which is irrelevant. So this year's budget, and why I certainly am again voting on the first resolution and the second, voting to approve, is because of the great job we continue to do.
Thank you. Michael?
Addressing Jack's concerns with the inflationary, or maybe it's not inflationary, maybe it's just keeping pace. I really, how would you address that problem, Michael? How would you address zero growth at the level of the county? That would make Jack happy. But could you do that? I mean, realistically, could you do that?
Well, do you want?
Yeah, if you'd like to answer.
Sure. Sorry, I apologize, I jumped in there. When we put this plan together, our goal was thinking about what is it going to take to recruit and retain a workforce, a qualified professional workforce. And we believe that the market is shifting from all the data that we've seen, and we tried to present some of that to you. And you're well aware of what other employers in the Valley, for example, City of Aspen and Snowmass Village and Basalt, have more aggressive pay plans right now than we do in terms of percent increase. And so could you hold it? Yes. We think that if our revenue projections are right, and I think that's Jack's concern, is whether we've projected our revenues correctly in the out year. If we projected our revenues correctly, we think this is what we need to do to recruit and retain a qualified workforce. We believe that if we stayed at zero, that we would start to lose some of our best performing employees to other organizations. Now, that said, if our revenues don't come in as projected, and I think this is Jack's concern, we will have to make adjustments to these plans. We will simply not be able to afford to do this. We believe that we are making a promise that we can keep 5 years out, but it's really difficult to project. So I guess the short answer to your question, Michael, and I'm kind of rambling on, yeah, we could do it, but we think there would be consequences to the service levels we're able to provide to our citizens. And we hope that our revenue projections hold and we're able to do this for our employees. If not, our competitive environment's probably going to change anyway. So.
Yeah, somebody give me the formula for zero growth. on the basis of government, that'd be fine. But really what we're talking about is expanded growth within the county, which is most likely going to happen. And with those expanded growth, you can have expanded expectations. I really don't see that there's a way to keep it at zero growth, because, as you said, you just can't maintain an organization's health at zero growth. So, I mean, I'm sympathetic to Jack, but I don't know where that formula lies for zero growth.
Rob?
Michael, I agree with you that zero growth is a non-reality with a government agency providing services to hopefully a community that's got a growth level of some sort. But I will say that I think one of the things that people are looking for out there is they're looking for an economies of scale with government in relationship to the growth of the county. Can one county employee provide a service for one person for X dollars? And is it X times 2 if they're providing it to 2 people? No, it's X times not quite 2. So it's and how much of an economy of scale can a government agency get in terms of in relationship to growth? If the cost of living grows at 2% in Pickens County, does that mean government should grow at 2%? To plow one road or to plow 2 roads, it doesn't cost double. A lot of times you have economies of scale, and like in most things. So I totally agree with you that a zero growth is not an option, and I'm not sure that's what Jack was proposing at all. Jack was merely, I think, looking at it saying, as the percentages multiply or compound year in, year out, is it compounding too quickly, or is it not compounding too quickly? I think as the years go on, we'll look at the budget each year. I mean, Jack kind of ended by saying, well, we're approving next year's budget, and this is a plan for the future, but we're going to relook at it every year, which we're going to do.
Yeah. Michael, Jack, and...
Yeah, I really look at it in terms of efficiencies, really, more than economies of scale. And so, because people tend to judge government by how many people are leaning on the shovel, watching people one person dig the hole. And that's the cliche about government. So it's really about efficiencies. And certainly my experience with Pickens County government and the observations of it is that there's a high degree of efficiency involved in Pickens County. And I would say there's more efficiency at Pickens County than other organizations within the valley, quite frankly. If you look at this room, it's an example of making do with very little. And I think that is, and doing a good job. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an exemplar of Pickens County, quite frankly. So.
Jack.
Yeah, I won't comment on the no growth comment because I didn't make it, but it's very clear for me that the escalators is my concern. When you go 1.5% bonus 1 year, next year 2%, remember that's on the 1.5 increase of the previous year?
No, the bonus does not increase the base. That's why it's a bonus.
Okay, so then I'll start at 2%. Thanks, I appreciate, because facts need to be facts. 2% next year after that is 3%, 3% is on the 2%. Next year after that is 3% on the 3% and the 2%, 4% is on the 3%, 3% and 2%. So that's my issue, and regardless of what is said further, I will not make any more comments.
Thank you. I'll close up with a real quick comment because I want to be clear. The right-hand column is the number of employees, and we are projecting to have less employees in 2016 than we will have in 2012 because of issues related to hopefully the recession in Health and Human Services and workers that we were putting in place temporarily for the 2012 election. So it is hard for me to imagine keeping people, or for that matter, recruiting people as we even in this time, have had roughly a 10% turnover of employees. And I know during the peak years, when the economy was so hot, we were seeing closer to a 30% turnover in employees. And it gets very hard, particularly to recruit, to tell someone you would be in a zero growth range for your salary from here on out, or 1% or whatever. You know, unfortunately, the inflation that exists in society, you don't see it drop very often either. You don't see the price of the telephone bill or the heating for your house or the groceries go down very often. And we're starting to see some real kind of food pressure, I think, going up. But these are projections for future years. The budget is approved 1 year at a time, and we will be with the market, as it were, whether it's going up or going down, to be able to maintain a steady place for the care of our employees. So that's my comment on that question. We'll turn it back to you for the rest of your presentation now that we have discussed at least one page of the existing material you provided. And I wasn't sure, Rob, if you had questions on some of the other things that were brought forward.
I have questions on the other chart, but I don't know if you have a little bit more. Maybe we can turn on the overhead so that the audience can get this other chart, because I think it's an interesting chart to kind of go over to the public regarding where our mill levies were last year and where our mill levies are going to be for 2012. The other additional page that was added.
So you're looking at like 16, 17, or 17?
18. Just page 18. 16, 17, I think, are graphs that kind of reflect what's happening on the chart of page 18. And thank you for entertaining me. It's important for the audience to see this. And I also pulled up my tax record, because I'll play a little of what Michael's been playing, that sometimes it doesn't relate. It's a little confusing for our public to understand, when they get their tax bill and what these mill levies are. I think Michael's made some good points in the past.
Okay, well, given all that, I think I may need to move out of the way of the chart over here.
So you want me to ask a couple of these questions? So I'll start by saying, the purpose for me asking these questions isn't really that we're not going in the right direction. It's really just kind of getting an awareness and understanding out there, because, as the property values dropped, we still need to provide the services to our population here, so we need to find a way of funding that. And we are already doing, as our budget has shown, a great deal of fiscal responsibility and cutbacks so that we can maintain the level of service for the lesser dollars and those sorts of things. The first thing that I have is just our property values have dropped about 20%. From my indication of understanding what's gone on with our property values. Our mill level from the general fund is going from 1.5 to 2.15, which is about a 43% increase. So, and we're adding an additional, and if you look at the dollars, it's not a 43% increase in dollars, it's much less than that. But we've got $222 being added to our general fund. Is there a general explanation as to where those dollars in our general fund are going?
The property tax funds all of the services of the general fund, so it is not specifically dedicated to one area or another. It's just the overall revenue from which we pay for the services.
But I think, Rob, if you look at the overall...
A little louder, John.
I'm sorry. If you look at the overall budget that's been proposed right now, operations are increasing less than 2%. Where we've really made a significant bump is on capital expenditures, which are going up 173%. Now, a lot of that has to do with being able to move 50% of our sales tax out of operations into capital, but really it's that property tax that is there behind that that's allowing us to continue funding our operations. I think they're going up 1.73%, if remember correctly, on the operations in the general fund, but 173% on capital infrastructure investments. So I don't know if that helps with some context.
Which, as part of our discussions in previous meetings, where this is the time to put in capital infrastructure because the interest rates are so low and we've got the money sitting in our general fund that we could use. The next thing that I just wanted to point out, and if I think I did my math correctly from my 2010 tax bill, is that the Pitkin County line item on mill levies on my tax bill was 1.984. So just for the...
What year?
And this is 2010, last year. So for the general public, what that number indicates is the general fund, the road and bridge fund, the social service fund, the translator fund, and the county general obligation fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So why are those not broken up on our tax bill, and why are other things maybe not added into that on the tax bill?
Yeah. Unfortunately, our software and the amount of space available on the current tax notice limit the number of taxing districts that we can itemize, and we're required to itemize the dollar amount of your property taxes that go to each taxing district. So we're required to at least have one line for the county. But given the limitations, we actually had 3 lines available. And so in doing that, we took, basically, you listed the 7 funds we have to levy property tax, but we don't have 7 spaces available. So we attempted to use the 3 available spaces to break it out as much as we could. And the one labeled Pitkin County that you mentioned is those 5 funds, including the general fund, which has the second largest levy of all of them. The largest levy is in open space and trails, and so we itemized that one. And the third largest levy is the Healthy Community Fund, and so we itemized that. What we could do, maybe to make it a little clearer, is, not just say Pitkin County, but explain more the funds that are in there. Again, I have limitations, though, and there are only 25 characters. So the best I could do for that would be to say County General, abbreviated, County General Road, TV and FM, etc.
How much does a new software upgrade cost?
It's more redesign of the tax notice that would cost, but the software upgrade would cost a little bit.
A couple $100,000 or $40,000?
No, a few $1,000s.
Well, maybe just looking into the pricing of that next year would be valuable. I mean, we have what we have, the notices have to go out, but, it might be worth taking a note of that and just, making a thumbs up or thumbs down at some point as to whether we should upgrade and redesign the tax bill.
So we can, I can take your direction. We could either, go with a broader explanation. We could put it all just as Pitkin County, and on our website or somewhere, break it all out. Because like the other districts also have, different levies. School districts each have about 4. The hospital has an operating levy, and they just have passed a debt levy for the expansion. So, to be on the same level as all the other districts, we'd only have 1. And so that would be an option as well.
Michael had a comment on this?
So this is our tax notice, it's not a state mandated form here? This is
Yeah, the contents are mandated by state law.
the contents are, but it's just the contents, not the layout,
Not the
number of
form,
characters. So it seems to me we should look into that. I mean, because Americans are used to getting a receipt that itemizes every single item that you purchase at a store, every single item that you purchase at a restaurant. This is not so much a purchase as a bill, but we would expect clarity in all other parts of our life, except for maybe the IRS. But so we should. I think we should talk about it further. But I think it's worth looking at, and certainly if it's just our software has some limitations, we should really look at that.
Okay.
And then
Rob, you
the
brought
last just comment to bring out is, these funds were brought on this diagram primarily because these are the funds that the county controls, but obviously there are a lot of other special districts. In the bottom grouping there, the library, ambulance, Twin Flats, and Redstone Ranch are kind of special districts that we control.
Yes.
That the grouping of those. So the total within Pickens County's control is actually going from 15.041 to 18.052, which is about 20%, which again doesn't relate directly to, but that's about the reduction in property value that we have, which relates to the graphs that you were also presented with showing property values going down, but income's trying to stay the same so that we can provide the same services. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because it was in our packet so that the audience got it on TV.
Let me put that graph up rather than here, Justin. This is the graph that you're referring to. And just real quickly, for the audience, what this graph shows, the purple line is assessed value, either increases or decreases by year 2005 through 2012. The red the bars then show the total property tax collections. We don't have certified mill levies for 2012 for districts outside the county. And so what you can see is that the red portion are all the other districts that Rob was referring to that are not controlled by the county. So that would be the school district, CMC, fire districts, what have you. Okay. Starting at the bottom, the green portion is the amount of property tax collected that supports general funds. So your law enforcement, social services, road, kind of your core functions. You can see that regardless of what's happening with property values up here, because of the taxpayers' Bill of Rights and giving those temporary...
And the Fenton Amendment.
And the Fenton Amendment. That collection has remained very steady through both the increases and the decreases. So, when property values were increasing significantly, the county did not increase its general collections. Open space and trails is the blue. They are not under the same Tabor revenue restrictions, and you see a little bit of growth. There was a voluntary reduction in mill levy to try and balance that out last year. And then other county services, those are going to be your translator, healthy community fund, those other mill levies. But you can see the county's portion, particularly the general fund portion, has not grown, nor has it decreased with the large swings in property values.
Thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring forward, Rob? Anyone else need the projector before we turn the lights back on? Okay. Thank you. Well, here's my agenda again. Why don't you guys continue with your presentation? I know we don't have any public in the room, but for Grassroots TV audience, and then we will formally see if anybody rushes in for public comment, and then go forward with that. So,
Quite frankly, I think we're there.
After 10 months.
Just explained it all. Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay. And we're going to need 3 separate motions, I think, on this. But let me ask any other board comments or questions on the 3 resolutions that are in front of us. Okay. There being none, I will open the public hearing for any comments on the 3 resolutions we're considering today. The first is summarizing revenues and expenditures for each fund and adopting a budget for Pickens County, Colorado for the calendar year 2012. The second is appropriating the sums of money to the various funds for Pickens County, Colorado 2012 budget year. And the third is levying the general property taxes for the year 2011 to help defray the cost of government for Pickens County, Colorado and its special districts for the 2012 budget year. There being no one here, I will close the public hearing.
So do we take these motions one at a time? I think?
Yes.
So
And wait a second, Michael, were you just going to make a motion, or you would?
I was just going to make a motion supporting a resolution summarizing the revenues and expenditures.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further board discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. George, why don't you do the second one?
I'll make a motion approving a resolution appropriating sums of money to the various funds for Pickens County, Colorado for the 2012 budget year.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this item? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the third item. Who would like to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to support a resolution levying general property taxes for the year 2011.
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Do we have a board discussion? Any comments? Jack?
Yeah, I'm not going to support this, as I did not support it first reading. I believe we made an error in taking the full allowable amount for the open space and trails dedicated fund. I believe that's truly a discretionary, and for me, when there's a chance to give back, you give back. In this kind of economy, when times are good, we probably don't even like it.
Thank you. Hey, Rob?
Yeah, I'd like to just say that I as well thought that, I'm going to vote for this, but I as well thought that that should have been a lower mill levy. And I also just want to say regarding, my comments in going through where our mill levies are going and where the economy is going, I think the county has done a great job getting this budget put together this year. It's been a very educational process for me, but I also think that it's not time to loosen our belts quite yet, and I think that's reflected in this budget. And I think if that property value line still continues to decrease, we're going to see some cutbacks in our revenue side that we're not going to be able to make up for on the mill levy side. So I think the county has done a great job. I commend the county staff for all the hard work that's gone into this. But I also want to just put out there that I think we should still be tightening our belts.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think anyone's loosening their belts up yet. I saw Michael's hand up first, then George.
Yeah, I understand what Jack's saying. I've supported the full mill levy for open space and trails, essentially because it was still $2 million less than we had collected previously. So we weren't really increasing taxes. We were just not falling as far behind. And in terms of the value of open space and trails, we don't ask our residents or our visitors to pay any fee when they step on the Rio Grande Trail or they go up on Skyline. And that kind of amenity only adds to this community's attraction and to this community's prosperity. And I think that's why the majority of us support open space and trails, even when they go to their full mill levy increase. And because I personally see it as a way of keeping a very healthy, prosperous, flourishing community, and I support that. So.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, the Open Space and Trails program, the mill levy has been labeled as luxury first. Now it's being labeled as discretionary. But in reality, it's been mandated by the public. No less than 4 different votes over the last 20 years has supported not only the initial mill levy, but an increase in the mill levy and the continued extension of that mill levy for the Open Space and Trails program. And I think it reflects the values of our community. What open space provides is an economic benefit to our community through our recreational programs with our trails in the summertime and in the wintertime with our Nordic program. It provides maintaining the rural character in our county that allows ranchers to continue to ranch on their land without fear of having to sell their property to a developer. It provides ongoing scenic vistas, which all of our tourists come to enjoy. It provides the opportunity to preserve and protect our historic structures and our history of our county. And it protects our wildlife and its habitat. So for all those reasons, it's been mandated by the citizens of Pickens County, recognizing the importance of it and the shared values that we have as part of our community. So I support that.
Okay. Well, I would just say that I think that there's a reason you have a 5-person board, so you can get 5 different opinions. And we try to put it into a mix and come out with a healthy result. We all approach all of these items a little bit differently. I think Michael is right, and I would put it in context. I get it's a little less than $2 million, but it is about $1.8 million less collection for that open space fund this year than last, and that was even with a reduction in the mill last year. So this is a reduction of what people will be paying into the open space fund for the most part, unless you've had a steady property value in a subsidized affordable housing unit. The difference in the mill from full collection at for the 2012 years is 3.79 mills. Last year the collection was 3.351, and so it's a 0.44 mill. I'm trying to look through our list to see if we have anything roughly in that line to talk about how many dollars it was, but I think we were talking about among ourselves whether that 0.44 should be reduced at some amount. It was going to be, I think, a fairly small amount for any given property when you reverse it and spread it among every county property. I've used it before, so I'll say it one more time. It's the old Frank Zappa line that you only get out of it what you put into it. And by all of us agreeing to put in, we were able to capture a tremendous amount of value by the changing nature of our community, which has become a resort community and a second home property dominated community, where a very significant number of our tax bills are sent out of county, as it were. And when you look at why those people make investments in Pickens County compared to other communities they could buy into in the Rocky Mountain West, whether it's Montana or Telluride, it is because of the amenities that we keep up and the overall character and input of our community. And I think that we've been leaders in a way that has actually inspired open space and land preservation in other counties surrounding ours and other counties in the West. And that is also important to me as a part of a larger environmental scheme for the Rocky Mountain West. So I will support this budget, and I do respect the opinions that have been put forward, and I think that that's why we have thorough and sometimes lengthy debates and discussions about these matters. But we have reached a majority consensus on this item. So with no further ado, we have had the public hearing on all three of these resolutions. We have a motion on the table on the floor. If anyone did have any further discussion, certainly not going to draw it short. Okay, then I will call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other business you need to bring forward during the special meeting? Okay, then,
We have executive
I know we have
session.
executive later, so we will, let's go ahead and take it and adjourn this special meeting for clarity, and then open another special meeting for the executive. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are scheduled for a break now, and then begin our agenda at 3:15. Because of the times posted for the public, I don't think we really can take anything in advance. Legally, could we go into special session and begin the executive session items?
I don't see why not.
If John's available?
If John's available.
I mean, we do have at least 20 minutes that we could do that.
Can we just call?
Yeah, call it.
Are you calling?
I can do the grassroots thing.
Okay, grassroots, why don't you go ahead and put us on for a break right now, and then we'll pull you back up if we are able to do all the citations and go into executive. Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. It is 3:15 in the afternoon of Tuesday, December 13th, and we are going to now discuss the draft comments regarding the Bureau of Land Management draft resource management plan and draft environmental impact statement, and the hearing that we had, or public comment on our comments that we had last week. So please take it away, Cindy and Ellen.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, basically we thought that I think we have 45 minutes this afternoon, and thought that time would be best spent just hearing your perspective on what aspect of the discussion that was had on December 8th at the meeting at the Eldebel Community Center. What aspect of that discussion you'd like to see incorporated into the draft comments. And also, we just want to, once we have that input, we'll go ahead and come back to you. We'll incorporate those comments to the extent you'd like them to be incorporated, and the good feedback that you gave us on December 6th, and come back to you. Cindy was going to find a date.
We did. I think January 11th would be our only opportunity, because the comments are due on January 17th. So I put in a request to Susan Murphy to get on the agenda for that meeting. unless you can tell me another one that would work.
So which day did you say?
The 11th?
The 11th, that's a Wednesday, that's a regular meeting? Okay.
Do you have a work session that week?
Well, we have Tuesday the 10th.
You do, okay.
Yeah.
And we have, given that it's open.
Yeah, but, and the turnaround time, but,
Whatever works for you, we'll be happy to do the 10th or the 11th. I wasn't sure if the 10th was happening, so, okay. And another part of that we need to incorporate that we've just now gotten together is for this Thursday, we're going to get together with BOCC, Eagle County, the Mid-Valley Trails folks, and
We've invited
Garfield
Garfield County and some,
Carbondale.
other jurisdictions to join us to,
particularly of areas of common concern, such as the Crown, where there's overlap.
Where is that going to be and when?
It's going to be
it will be at BOCC Town Hall at 3:30 this Thursday.
This Thursday?
This Thursday, yeah. We pulled it together quickly because Susan Felt from BOCC will be leaving town, and we wanted to include her.
Yeah, so she can be that day.
And I think that their open space comments are going to their town council today. So there'll be a lot of information to pass around and work together on. We also invited Snowmass in case they wanted to come. But because it's such a quick turnaround, those are the people we've heard from so far.
Yeah, we'll come back to you with some revised comments to submit by the January 17th submittal deadline. We thought, Cindy and I took copious notes at the meeting on December 8th and thought there was a really good cross-section of interests represented there. We heard from the wildlife aspect, we heard from the recreation interest, that was most specific to mountain biking. And we also heard from some ranchers who spoke on the topic of grazing and some potential conflicts between grazing and recreational uses. And there was a kind of a common theme that there needs to be a look at carrying capacity on the public lands as it relates to recreation, mountain biking, trail use, and in combination with wildlife habitat and wildlife needs, as well as agriculture and grazing needs. So that was I think, a common theme through the evening. And if you'd like, I can walk you through what Cindy and I heard as highlights of the discussion, or if you prefer to just have a discussion amongst yourselves without that summary, we can go in that direction.
Michael?
Since we were more or less all there,
Yeah.
I don't think we need for you to tell us about anything. I'd rather have a discussion about some of the highlights.
Yeah, and give us direction as to what we should add to the draft from George.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and certainly I agree with you, Ellen, that what I heard that came out for me was the concept of what is the carrying capacity for any of these parcels, either the Crown or even up here around Woody Creek. Similarly, it's interesting that the Forest Service talked about the same thing recently in terms of the impacts they're seeing in the White River National Forest, and they talked about capacity limit. So there is a carrying capacity or a limit that any particular piece of land can handle to adequately protect those resources so they don't become overrun by people. The other thing that I picked up from there is that, as we all know anyway, that the BLM really does not have the resources to manage. They don't have the resources to manage recreational areas. They don't have resources to manage or to monitor environmental needs, be it from recreational use or oil and gas exploration. And so for them to be able to look at any expansion of uses, without having the ability to actually monitor or manage it, I think that's something that we need to really voice our concern about. You know, unlike the Forest Service, where at least they have a revenue stream that comes in from user fees, it's quite a bit substantially more than just grazing fees that the BLM has, be the ski company or the guides or the outfitters. You know, the BLM really doesn't have the ability to monitor the Crown. And one of the ideas that came out specifically of the Crown was maybe there should be a user group, which is a great idea. But I'm not sure how that would play into your comments. I think the comments need to be more strongly centered that, you guys really don't have the ability to manage, and so we should not be looking at putting in what used to be called SRMA, Special Recreational Management Areas, that are going to promote these areas for further use, further development, without any sort of control. So that's what I got out of it. I think we need to err on the conservative side, looking at that carrying capacity for each of these individual parcels, and then our ability to perhaps work with the BLM, if possible, any of these areas to help perhaps put together user groups that would help self-manage these areas. But I think the overall thing for me was there is a limit in terms of how many people we can put on one piece of land and how many different uses we can actually utilize that piece of land for.
Who else would like to, Michael?
Well, that question was raised, but really there wasn't I think the work that we have to do is figure out what the mechanism is for enforcement of limits. And I'm not sure that the BLM can do it. I don't know if the county, I don't really know how to do it. That was the big question, was can you limit these areas? Can you put a gate on the areas and a counter and let up 50 people a day, and that's what the carrying capacity is. That question really wasn't answered. It was raised, but it wasn't answered. Maybe that's the next stage of how we deal with our public lands in conjunction with the Forest Service and the BLM. So what are those mechanisms, and does the county have any ability to deal with that? And I don't know what it is. Clearly, though, one of the clear limitations was dog limitation in areas where there's grazing. And that's something I could agree to.
And wildlife.
And wildlife, but it was raised by the ranchers primarily because it was scattering their cattle and driving their cattle down. So and we have that kind of limitations within our open space and trails land for the most part. So, but I don't know what that mechanism is for enforcement of limits on public lands.
Rob?
Yeah, I concur that those were the big takeaways, the carrying capacity and that the expansion of use has to be reflected in a cohesive management plan. And I think that crosses over to oil and gas too, that any sort of oil and gas, we need to, if they can't manage the recreation, who's to say they're going to manage the oil and gas that's there? And if it's, overuse and beyond its capacity, that says a lot. We also, I think there needs to be some brainstorming in terms of whether it's an intergovernment agreement on how it's going to be managed going forward, like the Grand Canyon, where you have permits going down to the Grand Canyon, and there's a point where this love it to death phrase is really catching on, and I think we ought to use it in there because it rings to a lot of people. There's a point where it's going to be gone if we don't do something, and I don't know if it's a public partnership or a public-private partnership with some sort of Crown management group, specifically for the Crown, but you can use the same model, I think, in the other BLM plots as well, in terms of how they're managed. But, and maybe open space and trails can weigh into that as well with the work that they do on conservation easements that we have, or other public lands that they do oversee management to them. And, maybe we use that as a model to say, this is what we're willing to put up. If you guys could put up your part of the share as well in terms of the management of these areas. Those are the big takeaways. I think the focus was primarily on the Crown, and I would have liked to have seen more input on the other things. I do, just in terms of process here, I want to make sure that at the end that we come to a consensus on making sure we know when we're going to see the next variation of what we've already gone through and given you comments on, and that we have time to kind of read that, make some changes, and then see a final. I'm a little concerned with the time frame of this. We really haven't made any changes to our letter yet. We're still collecting information. So I want to make sure we have enough time to approve whatever changes are made and then see a final draft. So just put that comment out there too.
Okay. Jack?
Well, it's certainly easy to agree with the concept of carrying capacity and how important that is to specific areas. And quite frankly, I think the whole forest, as well as BM lands, and regardless of what we're talking about, recreation, oil and gas development, etc. Something that has not been mentioned here, and I came away with, and specific to the Crown, is not only the concept of seasonal closures on the Crown, but total closure during, we're talking winter, for wildlife purposes. Whereas, previously there's talk about a seasonal closure for motorized and mechanized, but I think what I heard is total closure. Another thing that I'm unsure of, and honestly I have no desire to look in the document, but apparently there's been an evolution of land use designations and acronyms, etc. So obviously I want to point out here that we just need to be consistent in our approach, how they're applied relative to particular areas. And I'm sure staff picked up on that, but I was not aware of the evolution of different terminologies. So just to reinforce that. I actually thought the meeting was just an excellent, excellent meeting, and compliments to Rachel for suggesting that. Though individuals, for example, the ranchers and the mountain bikers and even the fellows in the back that were concerned about economy, whatever, although people address their specific concern or need, overall, I thought generally there was a basic agreement, without defining what we're talking here, about conservation and the importance of overall concern for habitat, and uses, and doing the right thing. And I'm inferring with the recognition that we can use the land, but we need to tread lightly. And so, that's my comment specific to the meeting. And of course, I took notes too, and I never want to give them to someone to try to understand them, read them, but I do understand them. And I looked over at them, and that's really the basics that I got out of that meeting. I think it was really a very positive meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Let me weigh in a few comments, and then we'll go back around with everyone again for other things that come up. In trying to stay a little bit to this topic, although it may be broader, I saw a little bit of what I would call not reconciling your different points of view. And I don't know how their document can do this, but, when you were talking about motorized and ATV use for hunting, and yet if the ATV use is year-round, you'll see less to hunt, that the diminished herds. So I don't think we got a if and then type of analysis on some of these things that force us all to reconcile our differences of what is the most important value. Is it better to have a great herd and great hunting opportunities even if you have to backpack in or backpack out, or is it more about convenience and then a far fewer tags eventually being issued or things like that for our region because of the herd itself? And kind of following along with that, it's a weird way of trying to come up with a master plan, because if they go forward, say, with their magnitude of oil and gas leasing, then the wildlife habitat on the Crown is going to become vastly more important than it is today. And so it's the cumulative impacts of these various approvals that, we can't evaluate the Crown on today's circumstances if the whole Crystal River Valley is all oil and gas. That's a big challenge. And so how do they evaluate, future management if other activities are approved or if other things happen? So I may not be explaining that, but I don't think any of this looked at a cumulative effect of all the different proposals here, there, everywhere else. The other is, I don't think, to me, the document really defined outcomes that we want in the classic sense. I mean, it had the 4 alternatives, but if we've said this is the outcome we want, and from that outcome will flow certain decisions, again, particularly related to the health of the wildlife, health of the airshed, the recreational character and economy of our region. So I think we need to frame some of our comments, or even to them, in terms of, well, what is the outcome? Is this just a master plan to get a master plan done? Or was this to reach certain outcomes for the long-term health of these public lands? And so I kind of see that. Education came up a lot. We haven't at the table, but I think that we've been dancing around it or implying it with management, that needs to be management. What's the educational component of use? And that a permissive plan that doesn't have management and education as part of it is going to result in conflict. That, as much as anything, I think we want to avoid road rage in the hills, conflict by not having management. And we need to talk a little about what negative outcomes would happen if you just open the gates and then don't have the resources, or, it's everyone's responsibility, so therefore it's no one's responsibility. If they say, well, we're not in charge of it's up to the Oil and Gas Commission of Colorado to oversee the wells, and it's up to the counties to oversee this, and but who is it? No one has there's no clear line of authority about the management's scenarios, let alone the resourcing for it. It kind of struck me that an area like the Crown, similar to something that we've done in the county, when we have a county master plan, we also have sub-area master plans. And perhaps there needs to be a much more intensive sub-area master plan on the Crown that really focuses in and down on those issues. I'm in general agreement with the ideas of total closure in the winter, dog restrictions, seasonal closures, but it seemed there was a lot of refinement about those, what does seasonal closure mean? Does an extra 2 weeks in the spring make a big difference? Extra 2 weeks in the fall? When a lot of refinement has to be given to the concept of seasonal closure, and I am talking about the Crown, but also particularly the winter, if there was a total closure, is there some area where a cross-country loop or two would be okay, but not the whole thing? I mean, that's what I'm saying, a really detailed sub-area that it can explain why these different nodes are being managed in this way, because of the whole. I bring it back to the whole and the outcome that we like in that area. I also had a thought that was similar to Jack's and George's of the SRMA designation. It really doesn't seem that that's right, that would just open floodgates inappropriately, but that are there any other appropriate designations out there? Or can they even create a new designation? That this, I don't know, but we need to find what the right designation would be. And then, I guess the other three comments I would make that are more to the broader document. I think the location where we held the meeting did tend to influence the type of comments we had. So if we had been in Carbondale or up in the Redstone Chapel, we would have heard a lot more about oil and gas. And I actually talked to some people leaving the meeting who said, well, we're not actually in Picken County and we're here about oil and gas, so who do we talk to? And I'd suggest that they talk to their Eagle County commissioners and others. So I think that we can't underemphasize the oil and gas just because that wasn't the magnitude of comments at that meeting. And the other kind of broader to the larger document is I think our language needs to be fairly strong on some things to say what we oppose. It's not just that we are opposed to Alt B on this because which pieces, and not just I know you have a lot of we prefer this one or we prefer a new one, but you need grounds to give them to turn things down. And so why this is inappropriate with the character, not lead to the right outcomes, why this is not consistent with whatever. But we need those words oppose in there, or other ways of expressing that. And then, for me, we need to emphasize more of the funds that have been spent by the public on public lands that are adjacent to these BLM lands. We just absolutely have to. The public has made an investment here, and that doesn't mean our land should become the only wildlife sanctuary or the only refuge, because development and oil and gas have ruined those sort of values on all the public land, But that's a challenge. So we'd like to look that we're working in partnership on these, considering the public land dollars that we have spent to maximize the value of their public lands. And often we're providing, whether it's the migration corridor link or the calving ground link, or severe winter range, but we've expended a lot of funds on public lands in a lot of these areas, and I think that needs to be almost emphasized as you go through the different maps of the different areas, of what we, the city, Eagle County, others have invested. And
you should mention the actual partners too, somewhere in the body of this.
Yeah, that there've been other partners.
And da-da-da-da.
Yeah, that it hasn't been just Picken County or our public dollars. And then, as I mentioned before when we first looked at this, and I know that Colorado Parks and Wildlife is just beginning to get the chance to really evaluate, but I think we need to really back up those values long term. That's just something that recovery and restoration and restoring or rehabilitating land is much harder than keeping it pristine and in good shape to begin with. Okay, those are my thoughts for now. George, you're up next, and then we're going to just go right back.
In terms of oil and gas, I think that's one area where we do have consensus throughout the larger community of the valley. And I think I think you've done a very good job in your draft, especially putting in the information from that air quality study that we have that really demonstrates that the BLM is currently really not using accurate information in terms of their decision-making, where and when they are leaving. And in some of these areas, again, I think you've stressed that have wilderness characteristics should be set aside for no further development, certainly in roadless areas. And I know you're probably going to have a chance now to talk to the White River National Forest folks, hopefully, to get an idea in terms of where they're coming at. But we know that they're also looking at no surface occupancy as part of their new EIS document. So oil and gas I'm not as concerned about, because I think I'm concerned about oil and gas, but in terms of us having a consensus and a strong front in terms of where we're coming from for Pickens County for the entire valley, I think everyone's on the same page, so that's good. I think where more of the challenges is when it comes to the recreational aspects and the multi-use between recreation, wildlife, and grazers. And what I'm concerned about is, and what I heard at that meeting was, what I'm concerned about is that Pickens County does not become a relief valve for some of these areas. That was used when, specifically for the Crown, the idea that the Crown is a relief valve for Red Hill. And what I don't want to see us happen in Pickens County is we become a relief valve for the recreational pursuits of the entire valley or the entire state. Certainly, again, the White River National Forest is trying to address that as well. Because, what happens next? Well, the next relief valve from the Crown becomes Light Hill. And from Light Hill, then it becomes Williams Hill. And then from Williams Hill, it works its way right up the valley. And I think we have to really stress that that's really not where we want to be coming from. Winter closures, we've spoken about, and I certainly the DOW spoke very loudly and clearly the importance of the Crown, Light Hill, Williams Hill to a certain extent as a critical winter habitat area, and there should really not be any winter use up there. But I'm really concerned of the next Crown, or the potential next Crown, because the pressure, as we know, for recreationalists continues, whether it be ATV users or mountain bike users, are always looking for the next place to go. And we can very quickly, we are very quickly becoming overrun.
I have a couple thoughts. I'll jump back in if that's okay, and go back to others. But we had a great presentation with Open Space and Trails this morning of their year-end accomplishments, and they had mixed in a few visuals with the written statements. And I don't know if we have an opportunity to put anything visual in here that might illustrate some of those conflicts a little better. But the one small picture you had of the dog drowning the deer in the river when it was off leash, I don't know, was that a file photo or is it, it wasn't photoshopped? We'll have to think about it. But because I don't want to. But if we can get anything visual in here, I think this would be good. Sometimes it's the picture speaks 1,000 words. I'm not sure if there's information we can use within the Ken Combs studies on groundwater resources that were in the Crystal River Valley and the shallow aquifers that we should be able to work within there. And again, express that our voters have voted to tax themselves for water quality and quantity going forward, that we've completed these groundwater studies that show very shallow aquifers and, potentially just of critical importance to so many people, residences. And then, of course, the Pavilion, Wyoming information is now new, and it's changed the landscape in a lot of ways that people are starting to evaluate these things. And so I think that we should certainly mention that within the oil and gas areas. A friend pointed out to me the other day, he goes, the odd part is that with Pavilion, Wyoming, water underground, subsurface, in these deep aquifers moves at a trickle. It's so slow that the well pollution people are feeling now could have started 15 years ago. It could have been from a frack job 20 years ago and taken that long to reach someone's water source. It wasn't like they fracked and everyone's, didn't necessarily all occur in the last 2-3 years, even though the residents have been complaining that long. It could have been from a long time ago. And so I think that that's just a large caution for everyone. And the last is that I want to ask you guys, or you could inform us later if you don't have any, but I don't think that no surface occupancy is really as safe a harbor as we might think it is. I think you're allowed to build the road into the area to do the drilling, and then you just can't occupy it later. But I don't know that it doesn't mean you're not doing a lot of road building. I think it means more you can't put a trailer. I'm just not sure what the term no surface occupancy means, as opposed to what you have on site, what equipment you can leave on site or not, and what does that really mean for that landscape. But, if you look at some of this 20-acre well spacing or whatever in some of these other regions, that could be an awful lot of road building to get the initial drill in. I mean, they still have to bring in one of those big old rigs to do the drilling. I think it just means that they don't. I'm just trying to figure out, what does no surface occupancy really mean? And can we rest on that very much? Okay. Other board comments? Jack?
Yeah, I'm going to just, I'm going to go through the memo because we touched on, of course, the meeting. So I want to reiterate a few things. Oil and gas is equally threatening, potentially impactful as recreation. It's just according to the site, et cetera, et cetera. But George, I'm unclear as to, I heard what you said, but we still want to be, I assume, very strong in our comments about air quality, and we've got to link it to concerns about health and safety, et cetera. And obviously, we'll send an addendum with this study, I assume. So I don't want to downplay that. It's such a critical thing that, the air quality thing, it could ruin the resort's airshed from western Colorado all the way to Denver, and all the ski areas, et cetera. And we know that could happen south going east also. I would hope that we reiterate your comments about wilderness study areas. They're very good and important. I guess it's important because it's such an issue at Congress that if they release the wilderness study areas from protection, then we support the alternatives. I just want to make sure the B and C as articulated in this area is so critical. And tar sands, I guess we add that into oil and gas. I don't really know how to approach that, but we know it's an airshed, potential airshed and water issue. So that link is always there amongst all of those potential impacts. And so I'm going to leave the air quality thing. That's, a little bit too deep for me. I really like our comments about not supporting or making sure the BLM does not legalize bandit trails. We need to be really tough on that. And then going back to comments, for example, on page 14, there are a couple places here, but 14 it says Pickens County supports the citizens' proposal regarding the management of the Crown. I think we need to delete that. I don't think we support the citizens' proposal. We're looking forward, I guess, to working with, user groups, whatever, but I don't want to say that we should support that. Is the board in agreement?
I'm in agreement, but I think there may be a slightly softer way to say it, to say we would like to build on the work that the citizens group put together as a seed effort for this sort of long-term management. How do we manage, and bringing the user groups into managing and things like that. But, I think there's some value to the exercise they went through, and I don't want to dismiss that. I guess that's what I'm saying.
But maybe I would articulate it as such: as proposed, Pickens County does not support, but look forward to further work
collaboration on the issue of recreation, whatever. But I think you got to say that what's on the table...
I'm not ready to sign off on it. I just don't know it well enough to sign off on it.
Well, what was in our packet, you know...
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean.
And I think overall, I'm hearing you say that the crown really needs to be separated out, and the work that was begun to look at it more specifically needs to be continued, that we're not there yet with all of that, and there are new stipulations that you're beginning to feel are important, like winter closures, dogs, those kinds of things.
Overall outcome at the end of the day, and then I think George wanted to jump in.
On this issue,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I'm just curious, when we're talking about the Crown specifically, given the timeline and knowing where this is going to go from the local office to DC, do we need to take this opportunity to actually state our case in terms of how we would like to see the Crown managed? And then with a caveat that we also want to be able to continue to work with the community in addressing some of these concerns, but do we need to take this opportunity to actually say exactly what option we want and how we want to see that managed, just like we do with all the other parcels?
You know, I think that's a good question, but we can call the BLM and talk with them about the best way to deal with it. But what I think I'm hearing you all say is that in this management plan, you don't feel that it's ripe. You know, that the citizens' proposal effort needs to continue to get down to the specifics, but that in our outcome measures, if you will, we feel very strongly that it's a critical wildlife area and that winter closures are important, as well as dog limitations, and then the specifics of how to balance the recreational management still need work. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but we do need to say, as friendly as possible, but as strongly as possible, that we don't support the citizens' plan, as at least I understand it. And I'm okay with mamby-pambying it a little bit, or add a courtesy because of the need of it's a multi-use area. But
I think on the sixth, you basically said that you don't support that plan wholesale, and you identified some aspects of it that you may support, and then defined areas where we have a departure and wanted to be fairly specific about those areas. So maybe Cindy and I can work on that section together and bring it back to you to see if we got the proper direction.
okay, let's go on. I know we're pressed for time. Page 13, at the top you talk about Pickens County has acquired recreational access to Light Hill and wishes to pursue development of a sustainable trail access to Light Hill. I think I know what that means, but I also absolutely share George's concerns because Light Hill becomes the next ground. There's just no doubt about it. And, you know, look at the money, et cetera, DOW spent in trying to manage that, the vegetation, et cetera. So we have to be very careful how we state that point.
And on that point, Jack, I don't know, I'll let Cindy and Ellen decide if this would be a valid comparison or not, but I was been under the impression that, you know, there was a time period in the 80s when people were proposing ski areas on just about every mountain in Colorado because they thought it would, you know, I'm going to build a new base village, it's going to be a new resort, it's going to be great. And eventually the Forest Service said, wait, saying how much demand is there, how many mountains can become ski areas, and I think there's a little bit of a comparison here with how many areas can, within our little valley, can become this sort of recreational amenity area, and that it shouldn't become a constant mission creep, especially as the state's population doubles by the year 2050 and doubles again by the year 2070, that we have to take a long-term view on this, even though it's only a 25-year master plan. But I think that the number of ski areas and ski acreage was something that eventually got limited. Just because you have a proposal or you want to build something here or you think you love to ride your bike where no one else is riding your bike, it doesn't mean there could be a loop system surrounding every community and every portal.
And I think the example of that might be, I don't think it's law, but it's policy, no new ski areas. New ski areas versus expanding
within permits,
within a permit area. Okay, continuing on the same page 13, under number 10, West Soapers Creek, Emma, it says the Crown Picken County supports RMA designation, etc. We've already talked about that, but that needs to definitely not be in there.
I think that there's a lot of confusion about this because some people thought we just forgot to put the S in front of the R. And RMA is definitely a
Recreational
different.
management
Right,
area.
it's different than SMA. I heard somebody say earlier that we were supporting the, they thought we were supporting the SRMA, and that has never been a part of our thinking here. And if I might just use this second to interject, I think that the BLM's in a little bit of a conflict too, because they're finding that they can get funds to help manage areas if things are designated certain ways. So they're kind of in this, struggle of, do they get funds to manage as we've asked them, to do, and how do they get those funds? And so there's a little bit of a dilemma here, because if it's not determined to be a recreation area, then there's no funding.
But their funding will change annually, and their priorities will change annually with the department. I'd hate to base our comment on their funding formula and then have that change fairly quickly.
And this is a value-based comment, practical also, but value-based.
Okay. So are you guys saying that you're not supportive of even a recreation management level approach?
Maybe we need to see the definitions of those things formally when we have the next hearing. And we are starting to run short on time now because we all love to expound on these things so much. And so I'm just going to ask you to hold off for 1 second, and I'll come back to you, Jack. But
I only have one more thing.
But I particularly wanted to ask, we have a couple other staff members here in the audience, Carla and Dale, who attended those meetings. And I just wanted to ask, did you have any other thoughts after that meeting or any comments you'd like to make for us?
Well, just a couple of tidbits. To echo Cindy's comment about the SRMAs, one of the vexing things that we are up against at open space is, of course, when we're trying to protect the flanks of these federal mountains, we'd like their financial help. And what I have been told is that they cannot seek an appropriation from their land and water fund for purchase unless it's adjacent to some sort of special designation. So, for example, over Red Hill, they have the SRMA, and that is, in theory, makes the surrounding land eligible for federal acquisition funding. So that's just an implication there. As far as the input from the agricultural community at the meeting, in my experience talking to ranchers, I find that they're one of two minds about the recreation, and the ranchers that came to the meeting you had last week are of one mind, but there are some other ranchers who will say it a little differently. For example, Emma Farms, and I thought they were going to be there, has a letter on file with us saying that they think that there's not as much conflict between the recreation and the agriculture as some of the other ranchers do. So that's something that's debated within the agricultural community.
Thank you for that. Carla, did you have anything you might want to add? I know you guys can funnel comments to Ellen and Cindy as well at other times, don't you?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to stress the importance of the air quality document that was submitted by the consultant. I thought that was a great document. I think it's really important. She felt that the BLM had underestimated the potential impacts from oil and gas development on the air quality. So I think that's something that we really need to take into consideration and emphasize to the BLM.
That's great, because again, that gets back to my whole cumulative. You might not think of air quality as affecting your wildlife herd size, but it may. It very well may. Okay, Jack, thank you. Thanks for letting me do that.
Yeah, no sweat. Per Carla's comments, page 8, under Public Health and Safety, Chapter 4, the sentence that goes energy development of BLM lands and talks about selected monitoring programs, etc., that needs to be part of that energy, the oil and gas
stuff and health and safety stuff. That's really good. So one more topic, and that has to do with land tenure. I guess the first question I'll ask is, this packet and the sections about land tenure and some of the attachments are reflections of open space policy, as you said earlier today's meeting. We, the commissioners of the county, do not have a policy. So how are we going to deal with certain areas relative to recommendations? For example, on page 7, Pickens County's Open Space and Trails Board recently adopted a policy, but it's not Pickens County's. So I personally think we, in this document, are talking about Pickens County, the organism, the whole. So I'm not sure specific comments from open space, at least I don't want to reference them as being commissioners' comments. Now, I don't know where to divide the line, and I don't mean as a criticism.
Knowing that we've run out of time, and that's a big topic, I was wondering, I had a little bit of thought on the same thing, whether we should try to break out some specific work session time for that one topic, even as we're reviewing the rest. Because, you know, we're obviously mixing lots of different topics up here right now because it's a big document. But I think that when we come back, we should have a more thorough discussion of that specific area.
If we can, you know, I have no problem zipping it right now, but I certainly want to approach this topic so we make sure, you know, where our comments are coming from and what the content is, because I have multiple disagreements with that section.
Okay, that sounds good. Any other burning, Rob?
Well, just one real quick thing on the same note, on page 14, under County Roads 111 Prince Creek, Crystal Parcel, it says Pickens County has submitted comments, and it's actually those two letters that are referenced are open space and trails. And again, it's, you know, is it us saying this that, I don't remember us approving a letter submitting comments on not permitting grazing rights on that parcel, but those two letters that are attached are from open space and trails.
Okay. That's a good catch on that. So again, we will try to set up some specific time on that topic and have kind of be able to lead us through that in terms of how we put that formally into our rest of our comments. So I think that is about it. I would say that when we get into January, maybe not now, I'd love to see us do what we can to continue to encourage private citizen comments and let private citizens know how to comment. So whether that's in our Pickens County ad with Pat Bingham, or whether it's, you know, some other noticing type of thing. But let's give a little thought about how we make sure the public really is heard on this too.
And Rachel, and including our Tuesday piece about agendas, etc., we often have repetitive information, and this could be a replacement, you know, just encouraging the public.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I know we're not talking necessarily about a new budget or something, but who knows, maybe the newspapers will give us a little PSA, maybe write it as a public service announcement and see if the radios will read it, or, you know, we can do a free letter to the editor, or whether, you know, if they lay out a small space filler ad and haven't filled the papers, they run it as a PSA, because we're not advocating a position, just public involvement. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys have done great work, and you did an excellent job setting that meeting up for valid and good comments.
And this is, as always, great body.
Okay, so John, you're going to get your tape recorder going, and we will go into a, well, we'll have to get the special meeting first, but we have topics of discussion, Aspen hydropower plant, state marijuana regulations, property acquisition, and was there advice from an attorney as well? Michael?
Some discussion about it.
Okay.
Michael, I apologize.
So, advice and attorney? Yeah. would be the, okay, yeah, we're in a little bit of a hurry, guys, because we're running behind schedule. If you can chat outside the room. We have an extension for that. I know you're going to want to stay to just to see us make the motion, and then we'll... Actually, Tom, why don't you help us make the motion before we do the tape recorder, because then...
Well, I want to get it on there.
Oh, yeah, that's right, that's right. Okay, first we need a call to order for a special meeting, because we adjourned the other one earlier today.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Yeah. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we are in a special meeting. Now we need a motion to convene executive session for the purpose of discussion of the Aspen Hydro Project, state marijuana regulations, proposed settlement of AVR water application and Raleigh property application, pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402-4B. Discussion with the ski code regarding Winter X Games and affordable housing acquisition pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024E. And is that where discussion of Lanedo issues might fall under as well, John? Michael's wanted to add something.
Sure, we can put it under that. If, well, can you tell me what the scope of that is?
It's a small scope.
Advice from the attorney?
Okay.
Okay, and that would be Colorado Revised Statute
24-6-402-4B.
4B. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to go in executive session for the purposes I have stated?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you very much, and we'll give Mike a couple minutes here to break down. Grassroots.